Chapter 406. This is the skin of a Qilin. In the main hall at the center of the Spirit Vein Mountain, the evil emperor stared at the black beast skin on the table and said something that Wang Chong didn't expect. Qilin skin? Let me take a look. The moment the demonic emperor old man finished speaking, a small and curious hand reached out from the side and grabbed the black hide on the table. Don't. Be careful. The faces of Wang Chong and the evil emperor darkened. They wanted to stop her, but it was already too late. The little sister of the Wang family had always been the type to act on her whims without any warning. Roar! The atmosphere in the hall changed abruptly. The scene that Wang Chong experienced previously appeared once more. Almost at the same time that Wang Xiaoyao grabbed the beast's skin, a loud and clear beast roar filled with a brutal and murderous aura suddenly resounded in the hall. An invisible and violent aura swept across the hall like a raging gale, dragging the three of them into it. Pacta! The beast's skin fell to the ground, and Wang Xiaoyao's hand loosened. Her face was pale, and she looked frightened. I told you not to touch it easily. Wang Chong smiled bitterly. His little sister had always been this rash. This beast's skin was extremely sinister. Just by sitting beside it, he and his master were already assaulted by the mental energy. Given how his little sister touched it with her hands, the impact was unimaginable. Little fellow, if you continue to be so rash and disregard my advice, don't blame your master for being impolite in the future. The evil emperor glanced at the little sister of the Wang family and said sternly. Wang Xiaoyao behaved obediently, not daring to say a word. Even though she was rebellious by nature, such that even Wang Chong couldn't control her, she was extremely fearful of the evil emperor. Furthermore, she had suffered a huge blow from the mental energy assault in the beast's skin this time. Even now, she hadn't recovered from it, so how could she dare to say anything? Master, a Qilin is an auspicious beast, so how can it be so sinister? Besides, is there really a Qilin in this world? Wang Chong asked. Dragons and Qilins were all legends. Whether it was his previous life or this life, Wang Chong had never seen a single one of them. On the other hand, he had seen many birds, beasts, insects, and fishes. Crocodiles, lions, tigers, elephants, orangutans. But Wang Chong was very sure that the voice in the beast's skin did not belong to any of those beasts. It didn't even seem like something an ordinary wild beast would have. Ha Chong, you didn't see it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Since we martial artists can obtain legendary powers through cultivation, what's so strange about the appearance of Qilin and the like? When I was young, I once saw an earth python. Its tail was on this side of the mountain, but its head was on the other side. Although these items are rare, they do exist. The evil emperor stroked his beard and said something that surprised Wang Chong. But thinking about it, it was hard to refute. Indeed, since martial artists could exist, what was so strange about the existence of Qilins? Moreover, when he thought about the otherworldly invaders that would descend upon the Central Plains in the future, wouldn't it be even stranger? Although I have never seen a Qilin, as someone who is well-read, you should know that Qilins did exist in the ancient records. If there is black, then there is white, and if there is good, then there is evil. If there is auspiciousness, then there is naturally evil and darkness. The evil emperor spoke calmly. Wang Chong fell silent. There were records of Qilins in the ancient records, and this was something that Wang Chong naturally knew. During the spring and autumn warring states period, there was a saying that saints were accompanied by Qilins. And this was even recorded in the history books. But this sort of thing was too unfathomable, and Wang Chong had always treated it as a legend. Until today, when he encountered this beast's skin. However, I don't really care if this is the skin of a Qilin. What I care about is this. As the evil emperor spoke, he extended 2 fingers from his sleeve and grabbed the black Qilin beast skin on the table. But unlike Wang Xiaoyao, after the evil emperor grabbed the beast skin, nothing happened in the room. It was as if it was just an ordinary piece of beast skin. What I care about is the treasure map on this beast skin. The evil emperor flipped the beast skin over, and a completely different treasure map appeared in front of everyone. This was a complicated map filled with mountains and rivers, and there were even some complicated markings that made it impossible for anyone to understand it. It was like a maze. In the world of sex, there is a legend regarding a peerless supreme technique called the Supreme and Infinite Origin Immortal Art. The evil emperor said. Upon hearing this technique, his little sister was still at a loss, but Wang Chong's heart suddenly twitched. When Li Sai handed this technique to him, Wang Chong didn't feel much about it. But upon hearing the name of this technique, Wang Chong felt completely different. The top 10 legendary techniques of the Central Plains, Art of God and Demon Obliteration, Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art, Supreme and Infinite Origin Immortal Art, Myriad Spirit Sea Art. Supreme and Infinite Origin Immortal Art was one of them. Moreover, this technique could definitely be ranked in the top 3 of the top 10 techniques. However, Wang Chong knew a long time ago that this technique had been lost a long time ago. Furthermore, it was during the Great Sui dynasty. If one wanted to obtain this cultivation technique, there was no meridian to be found. Thus, Wang Chong didn't even consider it from the start, nor did he include it in his search list. Speaking of which, this technique has a lot to do with our lineage. Do you remember what I told you before? The Little Yin-Yang Art and Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art are extremely easy to master because we don't need to cultivate them. As long as we continuously absorb energy from others, we will be able to gain the cultivation that others would take decades to achieve in a short period of time. With this technique, I was already unrivaled in the world of sex by the age of 30, looking down on all the experts in the world. But for every benefit, there is a drawback. When one's cultivation reaches a certain level, the higher one's cultivation, the more intense the conflict between the stellar energy in one's body, and the greater the risk of cultivation deviation. I spent nearly 60 years trying to refine the different kinds of stellar energy in my body and fuse them together, but I still failed in the end. In fact, it was also because of this that I was taken advantage of by my traitorous disciple. At this point, the evil emperor turned to Wang Chong, a hint of worry in his eyes. Chong, your little yin-yang art is advancing too quickly. You don't need a reason to kill someone in the army. It's even more convenient for you than it is for the people of our sections. This isn't a good thing at all. The evil emperor had personally experienced this, and he had almost died because of it. That was why he had completely given up on this technique and switched to the Myriad Spirit Sea technique. But there was no need to doubt the power of the Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art. As long as one could kill enough opponents and absorb their inner energy for their own use, one could become a top-class expert in the shortest time possible. In this aspect, the Myriad Spirit Sea Art could not compare. The latter was dozens of times more difficult to cultivate than the former. Even if they reached the peak, it would still be equally shocking. Master, be at ease. I know what I'm doing. Wang Chong sincerely said. It's good that you understand. The massive flaw of the Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art is not impossible to make up for. If you can obtain the Supreme and Infinite Origin Immortal Art, the two can complement each other and make up for the flaws of the Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art. But no one has ever been able to do this. The legacy of the Supreme and Infinite Origin Immortal Art is too mysterious. It only truly rose to fame during the Great Sui dynasty. Thus, I didn't mention it to you before. This is probably the only clue to this technique in the next several hundred years. The evil emperor looked at the treasure map on the table and sighed. Fate truly made fools of people. If he had obtained this technique earlier, perhaps it would not have been like this. But now, it truly was fate that made fools of people. His Great Yin-Yang Heaven Creation Art had already been broken, and even his dantian had been crippled. He had long ago become incapable of cultivating this technique. But how did such an important thing end up in Black Dragon Zhao's hands? Also, what's with this map? Wang Chong frowned. At the end of the Sui, the world was in chaos and heroes rose up. The Supreme and Infinite Origin Immortal Art probably entered the hands of the common people at that time. Black Dragon Zhao was a tiger blocking the path to the west, and plundering was his duty. Perhaps it was for this reason that he coincidentally obtained the treasure map for this technique. As for this map, I heard a little about it when I was in the martial arts world. It was said that the senior who cultivated the supreme and infinite origin immortal art had drawn his supreme technique on an ancient map that was completely different from the one we have today. That ancient map represented the origin and inheritance of this cultivation technique, as well as the tradition of this cultivation technique. The more you hear about the legends, the fewer you believe them. I never imagined that this legend would be true. The evil emperor sighed. Wang Chong frowned. This was also the first time he had heard of such a thing. Of the 10 top-notch cultivation techniques of the Central Plains, other than Su Jingshan's art of God and demon obliteration and the demonic emperor Old Man's great yin-yang heaven creation art, the other cultivation techniques were hard to come by. It was not very strange that the supreme and infinite origin immortal art would use the geography of ancient times as a clue to its treasure map. But with the vicissitudes of time, dragons and snakes emerging from the land, the geography of the ancient era was completely different from that of the Tang dynasty. It was basically impossible to find the location where the supreme and infinite origin immortal art was hidden by relying on the diagrams of mountains and rivers on it. Chapter 407. You don't need to worry about this matter. Leave the matter of the supreme and infinite origin immortal art to me. Have your eagle tamer work with me. The demonic emperor elder waved his hand. But master, a hint of worry appeared in Wang Chong's eyes as he gazed at his seated master. Although his master's hair had turned from white to black and he looked much younger, Wang Chong could sense that his mental state was not as good as he had imagined. If he carefully sensed it, he could even sense a sliver of chaotic energy in his body. This was the aftereffect of being ambushed and having one's dantian destroyed. The myriad spirit sea art required a martial artist to cripple their own martial arts. Without destruction, there could be no construction. Only by crippling one's dantian could one form these thousands of small spirit seas in the countless acupuncture points of the body. But the myriad spirit sea art required one to cripple their own martial arts, which was completely different from the evil emperor, who had been ambushed and had his dantian destroyed. The evil emperor had reached a certain level of mastery in the myriad spirit sea art, and his attacks were filled with all sorts of phenomena that ordinary people could not deal with. But because he had been ambushed and his dantian heavily damaged, he couldn't fight for long. If he fought for too long, he would immediately go berserk and die. This was why Wang Chong had never thought of asking his master for help even though the 1,000 June of Hyderabad ore had been stolen from Sindhu. Moreover, once his whereabouts were exposed, it would alarm those grandmasters and titans of the martial arts world who had ambushed his master, as well as that traitorous disciple. At that time, these people would swarm over, and not even the Wang clan would be able to protect his master. And once he was swept into a battle between titans of the martial arts world, even the Wang clan would be implicated. Thus, Wang Chong didn't dare to recklessly use his master's power. The area where his master the evil emperor lived had even been designated as a forbidden zone by Wang Chong. Not even Zhao Jingdian and the others could approach. Wang Chong didn't hope that the secret could be kept forever, but he could delay it for as long as he could. The hall was silent. Chong, your master appreciates your filial piety. However, I, your master, have been indomitable all my life and have never feared anything. Do you think I will be like what you think and hide here forever? The evil emperor said. Master, don't worry. I will try my best to help you find a way to completely repair the hidden danger in your dantian. Wang Chong knelt on the ground and said in a deep voice. It's enough that you have such thoughts. Master knows what to do. The evil emperor patted Wang Chong on the shoulder as a look of relief flashed across his eyes. The evil emperor had dominated the world of sex for his entire life, causing everyone to pale at the mere mention of his name. But in his old age, the evil emperor realized that what he was most proud of was not the fact that he had slaughtered the experts of the righteous and evil sex, but the fact that he had taken in this little disciple in his old age. Whether a person said one thing and did another, whether they were speaking from the bottom of their heart, he was able to sense it. At the very least, he could sense the utmost sincerity in Wang Chong's body. Wang Chong truly cared about him and wanted to help him. The demonic emperor old man was used to the deception of the martial arts world, and this sort of sincere emotion was extremely precious to him. Master has lived for 60 years and has seen and experienced far too many things. I know what can be done and what cannot be done. Moreover, the supreme and infinite origin immortal art is closely related to our lineage's great yin-yang heaven creation art. When I was young, I tried to find it, but alas, my efforts were in vain. If I can find a reliable clue, I cannot let it go no matter what. If we can obtain this legendary supreme art of the righteous path, perhaps our yin-yang fortune gate will be able to truly accomplish what our predecessors failed to accomplish, transcend the realm of peak consummation and reach an even higher realm. The evil emperor said. His voice was loud and brimming with passion. Making up for the flaws in the great yin-yang heaven creation art had been his lifelong wish, and he had spent almost half his life on this art. Now that hope was within reach, no matter who it was, no one could stop him. As for whether he could still cultivate after his dantian was destroyed, this was no longer something he cared about. Your disciple understands. Wang Chong understood his master's intentions and said no more. He respectfully kowtowed 3 times and then withdrew. After arranging for the eagle to assist his master, Wang Chong put aside the matter of the supreme and infinite origin immortal art. His mind was completely focused on cultivation. Time slowly passed, and each day, Wang Chong made significant progress, his strength increasing. Compared to the beginning, Wang Chong had gotten even stronger, and he was steadily advancing toward Tier 2 of the true martial realm. A clear and melodious cry, like that of a dragon or a phoenix, shook the heavens. At the summit of the spirit vein, Wang Chong shot forward like a rainbow, rising 10 some zhang into the air. Bzz. Spiritual energy gathered beneath his feet, forming a white, cotton-like mass of origin energy. Wang Chong stepped forward, circled around, and then leaped even higher into the air. Bang! On the second step, Wang Chong finally ran out of momentum. In midair, he executed the tail whip of the divine dragon, and like a shooting star, he shot toward a boulder 50 zhang away. Boom! With an earth-shattering explosion, a huge boulder weighing nearly 10,000 kilograms, along with the hard ground, was blasted into pieces. Billowing smoke and dust soared into the sky, reaching a height of more than 100 feet. Bang! After an unknown amount of time, a heavy and forceful foot stepped out from the cloud of dust. Wang Chong walked out, a silver spear in his right hand. His body was tall and straight, and his eyes were filled with disdain. He exuded a powerful aura. A gust of wind blew past, sweeping away the cloud of dust behind Wang Chong. A 10-meter deep hole appeared behind Wang Chong. The leaping dragon technique can only reach the second layer. I'm still not strong enough. Wang Chong disassembled the silver spear in his hand into pieces and stuffed them into a leather pouch on his body. Then he let out a long sigh. The leaping dragon technique was extremely powerful. Every time he soared into the air, he could absorb origin energy from the world. From start to finish, he could only soar 9 times in the air. At the 9th layer, its power was unbelievably great. Even his every move could summon the image of a dragon. Its power had already surpassed any true martial realm expert, and it could even defeat a profound martial realm expert. This technique did not rely on its own power, but on the origin energy of the world it absorbed from the depths of time and space, borrowing the might of the world to defeat its opponent. Right now, Wang Chong was on the verge of reaching true martial tier 2, so he could basically soar into the air twice. For a martial artist below true martial tier 4, a single touch would mean injury, and a single hit would mean death. It was impossible for them to block it. The leaping dragon technique and the stellar energy iron cloak give me the ability to protect myself in the true martial realm. Now, I'm just lacking. Wang Chong thought to himself. As he spoke, he opened his right hand. A black shadow rose from Wang Chong's body and landed on his hand. It shrunk layer by layer until it was the size of a walnut. It was a pocket-sized stellar energy iron cloak. Other than the leaping dragon art, Wang Chong's greatest harvest in his seclusion this time was the cultivation of Iron Cloak Li's stellar energy iron cloak. Although his cultivation was far below Iron Cloak Li's, Wang Chong's stellar energy perception and control were far superior to his. Iron Cloak Li's stellar energy Iron Cloak could be used for both offense and defense. With these two techniques, Wang Chong had basically reached the pinnacle of the true martial realm. So, opening his palm, the stellar energy Iron Cloak in his hand flew out like a bolt of lightning, enveloping a boulder 10 zhang away. Following which, the Iron Cloak contracted, and with a series of cracking sounds, the entire boulder was crushed into pieces from the inside out. Walala! Wang Chong lightly shook the stellar energy cloak, causing thousands of pebbles to clatter out and scatter into a pile. Elusive! Iron Cloak Li's first impression is still the strongest, and his thinking is too simple. The stellar energy Iron Cloak shouldn't be as simple as just a barrier of stellar energy. Wang Chong grinned. As he walked forward, he waved his hand and summoned the stellar energy Iron Cloak into his body. Yi! Placing his right index finger and thumb into his mouth, Wang Chong whistled loudly at the foot of the mountain. In the next moment, a cloud of dust shot up from the foot of the mountain, and in the blink of an eye, a greenish-black white-hoofed shadow appeared before Wang Chong, affectionately licking Wang Chong. Are we setting off? A cold voice sounded from within the mist. Huang Qian'e, dressed in a snow-white robe, had appeared behind Wang Chong on a horse. In just a few short months, Huang Qian'e seemed to have undergone a significant transformation. She had grown stronger, but at the same time, she had also become more aloof, transcendent, and otherworldly, like a fairy who had descended from the mortal world. Over the past few months, Huang Qian'e had clearly benefited from it, and her strength had grown stronger and stronger. Perhaps it was due to the thunderclap of dainty hands. Wang Chong felt that the higher Huang Qian'e's cultivation got, the colder and more serene she became, as though she had transcended the mortal world. She gave off a feeling of alienation. Anyone else would have long felt ashamed before Huang Qian. But Wang Chong did not. Let's go, it's about time we leave. Wang Chong leaped onto his steed and galloped down the mountain. Huang Qian'e followed closely behind him, and it didn't take long for the two of them to leave the spirit vein. Half a day after leaving the spirit vein, Wang Chong arrived in the vicinity of Deflecting Blade Manor. However, unlike usual, Wang Chong didn't head toward Deflecting Blade Manor. Instead, he stopped at a hill. Wang Chong, you're finally here. Chapter 408. Huang Qian'e, stop. Before the two could get close, a spear was pressed against their chins, giving them quite a fright. Wang Chong hurriedly stopped Huang Qian'e. You said you wanted to come to Deflecting Blade Manor to find them? Huang Qian'e examined the three, a suspicious light in her eyes. Even though she had been at Wang Chong's side for a long time, there were still some things that Huang Qian'e did not know. For example, the news that Wang Chong had sent through carrier pigeons. Yes. Wang Chong smiled. He had left the spirit vein not because he was strong enough, but because he had received a request for help from 5th Prince Li Heng. Huang Qian'e, can you give us some space? Wang Chong made a gesture of invitation. Do you think that I care? Huang Qian'e held her head high, coldly snorted, and turned to leave. Although she was very curious as to why Wang Chong had seen these two acting suspiciously, Huang Qian'e's pride did not permit her to linger. Although she had left with her horse, Huang Qian'e did not go far, waiting around 50-some zhang away. Who is that woman? Li Xiang looked at Huang Qian'e's back, a strange look flashing through his eyes. That moment just now had truly given him a fright. Although Li Jingzhong would often berate him and even slap him, that was because he had grown up with him and had a special status. This was the first time someone outside of the imperial palace had pointed a sword at his neck. He's my guard. Wang Chong gave a simple explanation. Huang Qian'e was a daughter of the Huang clan, so she was very far from the imperial palace. Li Heng and Li Jingzhong both had warm expressions on their faces when they heard Wang Chong's answer. Wang Chong knew that the two had misunderstood, but he only smiled and did not explain. Your Highness, what's going on? Why are you in such a hurry? Wang Chong asked. Li Heng's messenger pigeon had come in a hurry. If not for this, he would not have left the spirit vein so quickly. Wang Chong, you must think of a way to help me with this matter. Speaking of proper business, Li Heng's face instantly revealed a worried expression. Right now, I can only think of you. Yes, young master, you must help Her Highness. Otherwise, your highness would really be consigned to eternal damnation. Li Jingzhong also chimed in, his anxiety no less than Li Heng's. What's going on? Wang Chong asked. Father has summoned me to the palace. Li Heng spoke concisely. His Majesty summons you to the palace? Wang Chong was stunned. This should have been a good thing, but when he saw Li Heng's anxious expression, he immediately realized something. Someone intentionally facilitated this? Yes, third brother arranged it. The fifth prince said, and his words revealed a very fearful expression. Of all the princes of the imperial clan, the third prince was one of the most feared. He had a strong desire to ostracize others and would use any means necessary. At the same time, he would never leave behind any evidence that could be used against him. What's going on here? It's not like His Majesty has kept you in Kunwa training camp for the first time, so why did he suddenly summon you back to the palace? There has to be a sufficient reason, right? Wang Chong said. After spending more than a month on the Spirit Vein Mountain, Wang Chong knew that something had happened that he did not know about. Someone has found out that His Highness has recovered his martial arts. A voice came from the side. It was Li Jingzhong who interrupted from the side. How could this be? Not many people should know about this, right? Wang Chong said in surprise. Li Heng had always kept a low profile in the training camp. Wang Chong had only found out that Li Heng was in the same place as him after spending several months there. Moreover, among the princes, Li Heng had already been proven to have no hope of cultivating, so he was the one that no one paid the least attention to. As long as he did not reveal it and Li Jingzhong did not reveal it, and in truth, Li Jingzhong would never reveal it, given how inconspicuous they were, no one should have known. I ran into Ni Huang in the training camp. Li Heng helplessly said, and then he gave a rough account of what had happened. As the saying went, if it's a blessing, it's not a curse, and if it's a curse, it can't be avoided. Li Heng's conduct had always been abnormally inconspicuous among the princes. Ever since he had his blood exchanged and could cultivate, he had become even more inconspicuous. Whenever he had the time, he would enter the mountains outside the training camp. As for Wang Chong's deflecting blade manner, Wang Chong had warned him that Princess Ni Huang was there and that he should do his best to avoid her. If there was nothing important, he should do his best not to go to deflecting blade manner and send a messenger. If he had to go, he should do his best to avoid Princess Ni Huang. Li Heng listened to all this, but he didn't expect that. When he returned from the forest at night, he happened to run into Princess Ni Huang, who was strolling around the training camp. The two of them bumped into each other, and Li Heng was left dumbfounded. Princess Ni Huang's cultivation was much higher than his, and she was accompanied by an unfathomable old nanny who possessed profound martial arts. The old nanny took Li Heng's wrist and immediately understood. Li Heng's face was pale, and it took him quite some time to recover. All this time, he had been able to live a stable and inconspicuous life precisely because he couldn't cultivate martial arts and posed no threat to the other princes. Thus, the cruel war of the princes was very far away from him. There weren't too many attacks focused on him. But if he could suddenly cultivate martial arts, everything would be completely different. He would receive a great deal of attention, and all kinds of attacks, both overt and covert, would be impossible to guard against. There was no such thing as familial love in the imperial household, and the conflicts between the princes were even more cruel. The result would not be as simple as being injured or being demoted. If Li Heng had secretly cultivated and accumulated enough strength, it would have been fine. But right now, he was still extremely weak. This would only cause him to suffer even fiercer attacks, perhaps even attacks from many sides at the same time. If one could eliminate one's opponent while he was still weak, then one couldn't just sit and watch him grow. This was a tacit rule of the imperial household. Upon understanding this, one could understand why Li Heng was in such a rush. But if Princess Ni Huang discovered that you can cultivate martial arts, why was it the third prince who reported it? Wang Chong asked. This is why I don't like staying in the court. Li Heng sighed. Because princes don't just compete with each other, they occasionally cooperate. It's not good for the first prince to appear. Thus, the third prince is the best method. Moreover, The assassins who tried to assassinate His Highness were basically sent by the third prince. Li Jingzhong said. He had spent his entire life in the imperial palace and had seen all kinds of power struggles, schemes, and deceit. He had long ago seen through all of this and understood the tricks behind it. But this isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is that the third prince recommended His Highness to His Majesty, heartily praising His Highness, saying that His Highness is talented and has made great progress, already reaching Origin Energy Tier 8. He asked His Majesty to greatly reward His Highness. Li Jingzhong sighed. But the third prince clearly knows that even though His Majesty rarely interferes with the War of the Princes, using the method of raising goo, what His Majesty hates the most is someone deceiving him among the princes. The third prince is clearly praising His Highness, but in reality he wants to push His Highness into the pit of fire. In the current situation, Imperial Father has already summoned me to the palace. If I enter the palace and display myself, I will be committing the crime of deceiving the sovereign, and my other brothers will also hate me. If I don't display myself, I will still be committing the crime of deceiving the sovereign, and my other brothers will not let me off. No matter what I do, I will be in the wrong. Li Heng's brow was tightly furrowed, his anxiety and nervousness evident in his words. In the depths of the palace, without any faction, background, the protection of his maternal clan, or the strength to protect himself, he was in a situation where a catastrophe was imminent. He did not have the strength to resist the princes, but he was simultaneously attracting their hostility and hatred. One could easily imagine Li Heng's situation. In reality, it was already quite impressive that he could maintain his composure and seek out Wang Chong to discuss countermeasures. Anyone else would have long ago been at a loss for what to do. Wang Chong silently creased his brow. The situation before him had already somewhat surpassed his expectations. He had always avoided the War of the Princes. This was not his area of expertise. Wang Chong, only you have seen Imperial Father, and it was only after he imprisoned you in the Imperial prison that he released you. In this aspect, only you can help me. Li Heng immediately revealed the true reason for seeking out Wang Chong. A monarch does not go back on his words. The words spoken by the emperor could not be changed. The words of the Son of Heaven could easily be changed by other sovereigns, but it was extremely rare for the Holy Emperor, the Son of Heaven. In the past few decades, the words of the Holy Emperor had basically determined a person's life or death. In all his years in the palace, Li Heng had only heard of a few people like Wang Chong, who had been vilified by the Hu generals and thrown into the death prison, and who had caused such a huge uproar, but had still managed to come out alive. In the end, everyone could see how much the Holy Emperor cherished Wang Chong. There was no doubt about this. Young Master Chong, a sovereign's heart is unfathomable. You were so confident in presenting the memorial, even risking the wrath of the world and His Majesty, so you must have understood His Majesty's thoughts. Young Master Chong, you must not be stingy in saving His Highness. Li Jingzhong also said, tears on the verge of flowing out of his eyes. Although he knew that this scoundrel wasn't a good person, and he didn't even know where those tears had come from, Wang Chong had to admit that this bastard Li Jingzhong was sincerely trying to help Li Heng. This is troublesome, Wang Chong quietly said to himself, his brow furrowed into a deep frown. He knew his own situation best. Li Heng and Li Jingzhong had completely overestimated him. In the regional commander's incident, it wasn't that he had grasped His Majesty's thoughts and knew that nothing would happen to him, but that he had cast aside his life and death. But no one would believe him on this point. Moreover, based on his memories, Li Heng had never been summoned to the palace from the training camp in his last life. There was no doubt that it was his interference that had brought about this danger. Chapter 409. Li Heng and Li Jingzhong silently looked at Wang Chong, their eyes brimming with anticipation. Even the distant Huang Qian seemed to sense something, her gaze falling on Wang Chong. When do you need to enter the palace at the latest? I need to enter tonight. I only have 2 hours at most, Li Heng said. Time was tight. If not for this, he would not have been in such a rush to urge Wang Chong. It seems like Big Uncle can't be counted on. Wang Chong's heart sank at Li Heng's words. When he had first received the news of Li Heng's matter, His first instinct had been to seek help from his big uncle. His big uncle had accumulated a great deal of experience in this aspect. Although it was very difficult to guarantee that he would be able to understand the imperial heart, his decades of experience meant that he could at least give a clear suggestion. But the eagle had sent word that something had suddenly happened in the imperial court, delaying his big uncle. He would need at least 4 to 6 hours before he could come out. In other words, he couldn't count on his big uncle at all. Right now, Wang Chong was truly fighting alone. It seems like I can only rely on myself. As Wang Chong thought to himself, his brow creased tighter and tighter. This matter was very risky. If he did it well and helped fifth Prince Li Heng escape this calamity, Li Heng would have an enormous amount of trust in him. Coupled with the fact that he had helped Li Heng undergo a blood exchange, he would truly become a member of Li Heng's inner circle. Although this was a small matter, in the future, even if his entire clan went bankrupt, he still might not be able to enter the heart of the future son of heaven of the Tang dynasty and become a member of his circle. There was only one chance. If he succeeded, he would obtain Li Heng's absolute trust and become an important minister, just like his grandfather. But at the same time, if he failed, Wang Chong would have to pay an enormous price. All his previous efforts, including his contribution to Li Heng's blood exchange, would be written off. At the same time, Li Heng would begin to doubt his abilities and distance himself from him. And the worst thing was that because of him, the fate of the Tang dynasty had been greatly deviated. For example, the Wang clan was not destroyed, the king of Song was not demoted, the regional commander's system was not fully implemented, and he and Yang Zhao had become sworn brothers. Everything was completely different from what he remembered. If all of this could undergo such a massive change, who could guarantee that Li Heng, the future son of heaven, would not truly be buried? These were all things that Wang Chong needed to consider. How can you catch tiger cubs without entering the tiger's den? Maybe it's time for a change. As Wang Chong looked at the expectant and worried Li Heng, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. The current Li Heng was far from the future son of heaven, brimming with talent and ambition. His experiences in the first half of his life and Li Jingzhong's influence on him caused his character to have too many weak elements. That was why when he encountered this kind of situation, he couldn't make up his mind, and the first thing he thought of was to find him. But if he was the future son of heaven, he would never be like this. Rome wasn't built in a day. If Wang Chong wanted to change Li Heng's character, get rid of those weak and indecisive elements and make him valiant, decisive, firm, and decisive, this was the best chance. Your Highness, do you trust me? Wang Chong suddenly asked. Of course. Li Heng immediately replied after a momentary daze. Wang Chong had basically given him a new lease on life. If Wang Chong didn't trust him, Li Heng would not have come here to find him. Your Highness, once you enter the palace, if His Majesty examines you, do your utmost to perform. You can't hide anything and you can't cower in the slightest. Wang Chong suddenly said. His eyes were bright and his voice firm. Wang Chong's decisiveness left Li Heng and Li Jingzhong, master and servant, flabbergasted. But wouldn't that make me an enemy of everyone? All my other brothers would definitely view me as a thorn in their side, a thorn in their flesh. Moreover, His Majesty would probably think that I'm deliberately hiding something. Li Heng said in shock. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse, and if it's a curse, it can't be avoided. The fact that Your Highness can cultivate martial arts has already spread, and no matter what Your Highness does, you can't change this fact. Since it's already like this, what use is there for Your Highness to continue hiding? Wang Chong calmly said. But what about Imperial Father? What will Imperial Father think of me? He will only think that I'm a schemer who's deliberately deceiving him. When the time comes, he'll definitely be furious. Eighth brother is a lesson to be learned from. Li Heng said, somewhat fearful and uneasy. Eighth Prince Li Long had once been greatly favored by the Holy Emperor. Although he was ranked very low, he was no less favored than the first prince and third prince. But Li Long had colluded with a minister of the court. Later on, when the matter of that minister was exposed and the eighth prince was implicated, the eighth prince did his utmost to deny any involvement, repeatedly declaring to the Holy Emperor that he had nothing to do with that minister. Later on, The Holy Emperor was enraged and, because of this, banished him to the cold palace and stripped him of his status as a prince. 8th Prince Li Long was both shocked and afraid, sorrowful and regretful. In the end, he died of depression in the cold palace. This was a matter from 10 years ago. There was no one in the palace who did not know of this matter. All the princes knew that although His Majesty did not care about the conflicts between princes, did not care about the collusion between princes and ministers, he would not tolerate anyone's deceit. There was no consequence worse than deceiving the sovereign, because that was a capital offense. Once one was branded as deceiving the sovereign, it basically meant the end of one's political career. Your Highness, you are wrong. If His Majesty had already determined that you were deceiving him, he would never have summoned you into the palace. He would have long since dealt with you. Summoning you into the palace is proof that His Majesty does not completely trust the 3rd prince and still has a sliver of hope in you. Moreover, Your Highness, you still do not understand. Every step in the palace is treacherous, and the war of the princes is fraught with danger. Right now, the one who can save you is not me, nor is it anyone else, but His Majesty. Only His Majesty is your greatest backer. Wang Chong sternly said, Imperial Father is my greatest backer? Wang Chong's words left Li Heng and Li Jingzhong dumbfounded. It was obvious that this was the first time they had ever heard someone say these words to them. Your Highness, do you still not understand? Only by obtaining His Majesty's favor can you obtain true peace. As for everything else, whether you hide in the Kunwa training camp or do your best to keep a low profile, you will only be putting your tail in the sand and not a solution. Only His Majesty can truly guarantee your safety. Wang Chong sighed. In truth, if you make good use of this visit to the palace, not only will it not harm you. On the contrary, it will be an excellent opportunity for you to show off in front of His Majesty and gain his favor. Even though Wang Chong didn't have much experience in dealing with political affairs, he didn't think too much of it. However, Wang Chong was someone who had read many history books. He had a clear understanding of the nature of the War of the Princes that others could not reach. In the end, the War of the Princes was a struggle between a group of people surrounding a single person. And this person was the Holy Emperor, the Son of Heaven, who reigned supreme in the court. The life and death of all the princes, their joy, anger, sorrow, and resentment, were all in the hands of that person. If one could not clearly see this point and was lost in a momentary gain or loss, then the gains would not make up for the losses, and one would truly be lost. Li Heng and Li Jingzhong had long ago found themselves speechless. It was clear that the two of them had never imagined that Wang Chong would say something like this. But if I do this, His Majesty will think that I was deceiving him in the past. Perhaps my schemes are too deep, and my residence is too deep. Li Heng uneasily said. You're wrong. His Majesty has grand plans. The north reaches the Yin Mountains, the south reaches Jiaoji, the east reaches Goguryeo, the west reaches the Tsong Mountains, and then the western regions Abbasid Caliphate and Karax Spazinu. The powerful and prosperous Tang dynasty was single-handedly established by His Majesty after many years of hard work. What His Majesty reveres is individual courage and strength. If Your Highness continues to cower and cower, then you will truly be running in the opposite direction, seeking fish from a tree. If Your Highness can display your true strength and show your desire to advance, I believe that not only will His Majesty not blame you, he will even view you in a new light. Wang Chong sternly said. His thoughts were becoming clearer and clearer. The current Son of Heaven was a valiant sovereign who revered strength. The appearance of so many great generals on the border was the best embodiment of the Son of Heaven's valiance. As long as one knew the sovereign's heart and did what he liked and appreciated, it was fine. Although the sovereign's heart was hard to fathom, the sovereign's will could be seen. It was ever-changing but always the same. It was like how fog obscuring the eyes, but as long as one knew the direction, one would never get lost. This was Wang Chong's first attempt to intervene in the most dangerous struggle for Crown Prince of the Central Plains. Wang Chong was well aware that once one took the first step, one could never turn back. Your Highness, just think about His Majesty's path to the throne and you will understand. His Majesty's every step was taken through blood and fire. Without formidable martial strength and firm will, it would be impossible for him to reach this step. If your highness continues to cower and yield, do you think that his majesty's insight will be of any use? Wang Chong had been observing Li Heng's reaction this entire time, and he knew that these words alone would not move him, so he added a little more fuel to the fire. As expected, upon hearing Wang Chong's final words, Li Heng's body trembled, and his expression immediately changed. There was practically no prince who did not know of the history of the Holy Emperor's insignificant days. The coup d'état before his ascension to the throne was even more legendary. As a child, Li Heng had heard of it, so he was naturally very familiar with it. In Li Heng's heart, his imperial father was a godlike existence. Wang Chong's words had finally had an effect on him. Your Highness, you no longer have a path of retreat. Only by moving forward and actively displaying yourself will you have a sliver of hope. This is your only chance. Wang Chong said, but if this happens, your Highness will truly become everyone's target. In the palace, your Highness will have no one to rely on, so you won't be able to resist the other princes. If your performance is too dazzling, the other princes will want to get rid of you even more. Li Jingzhong said with an uneasy expression. Chapter 410. Wang Chong couldn't help but glance at him. Although this fellow was sinister and cunning, his words weren't without reason. I can think of a way to contact Consort Tai Jin for you. With her help, the other princes shouldn't dare to touch you for the time being. However, all of this will have to wait until you get past this trial. Wang Chong said. At the mention of Consort Tai Jin, Li Heng and Li Jingzhong's spirits were roused, and their expressions changed. In the regional commander's incident, the Wang clan and Consort Tai Jin were mortal enemies. They knew that the Wang clan and Consort Tai Jin had reconciled, but they hadn't expected that Wang Chong would still be able to use his relationship with Consort Tai Jin. Young Master Chong, could you have Consort Tai Jin step forward? Li Jingzhong asked, a moved expression on his face. Wang Chong shook his head, interrupting Li Jingzhong. He knew Consort Tai Jin, but that was all. Consort Tai Jin's status wasn't at the level where he could casually make decisions for her. Especially now. Time was short and there was no time to think. Wang Chong and Li Heng discussed for a while longer, and then Li Heng and Li Jingzhong left together. I hope that it will succeed. As he watched Li Heng and his servant ride away, a hint of worry flashed through Wang Chong's eyes. He had done all he could, and there was too little time, so this was all Wang Chong could do. As for whether it would succeed or not, it was still unknown. That person is a prince of the imperial household? Huang Qian'er suddenly asked. At some point she had walked over. How did you know? Wang Chong's eyes widened. Huang Qian'er was still at the true martial realm, so at that distance, she shouldn't have been able to hear what they were saying. Did you think that I was eavesdropping? Huang Qian'er could tell what Wang Chong was thinking with a single glance. With a displeased snort, she coldly turned her head away. The way he walks. Even though you didn't tell me, do you think I can't tell? That's the gate of the princes and princesses in the palace. The atmosphere suddenly became a little stiff. A light breeze blew past, and Wang Chong felt a chill run down his spine. He felt an indescribable awkwardness. This woman was far smarter than he had imagined. Cough, cough. Wang Chong had just coughed a few times when Huang Qian'er interrupted him. There's no need to explain. Tell me, where are we going next? Huang Qian'er said mercilessly with a cold expression. This was the first time Huang Qian'er had displayed such an overbearing attitude in front of Wang Chong, and it was clear that she was somewhat dissatisfied with Wang Chong's request for her to retreat. Wang Chong rubbed his nose, knowing that he was in the wrong. He laughed bitterly in his heart and did not argue with her. However, Huang Qian'er's words had reminded him of something. In terms of time, it should be about time. Wang Chong raised his head, his gaze sweeping across the sky. This sudden action also attracted Huang Qian'er's attention, and she also raised her head to look at the sky in astonishment. A few moments later, a massive rock eagle flapped its wings and flew over from the western horizon. Wang Chong extended his right hand and caught the rock eagle, after which he took the letter from its leg. As expected, Wang Chong nodded as if he had expected this. After reading the contents of the letter, Wang Chong crushed the paper into powder, allowing it to fall through his fingers. "Let's go to the capital." Saying so, Wang Chong leaped onto the back of his steed. "We're not going to Deflecting Blade Manor?" Huang Qian'o was surprised, and she subconsciously glanced at the nearby Deflecting Blade Manor. This place was probably only a few kilometers away from Deflecting Blade Manor. "We're not going, because we have other things to do." Wang Chong grinned, but he was thinking back to the training camp trial from several months ago. At the time, Wang Chong had captured that Arab, and Li Zongqi had mentioned that a mysterious group of Uzun had incited them to go on a rampage and plunder. Now that so much time had passed, it was about time to put an end to this matter. "Hiya." Wang Chong urged his horse to turn around and ride back to the capital. "Have you found out everything?" Wang Chong looked down from his vantage point at the eagle and several Wang clan guards who had come out to greet him. "I've found out everything." The eagle lowered his head respectfully. "All of the arrows point to the Uzun diplomatic mission in the capital. In addition, I secretly brought Li Zongqi to their embassy to confirm the matter, and Li Zongqi also identified a few of the Uzun guards as the mysterious Uzun experts who appeared in their stronghold back then. Li Zongqi was the bandit leader who had told Wang Chong about the Iron Cloak highwayman. In addition, according to the information we've found, the leader of the Uzun diplomatic mission is the Uzun First Prince. He has already been in the capital for more than 3 months now." Li Zongqi said. "The Uzun First Prince?" Wang Chong frowned, and a contemplative look appeared in his eyes. A moment later, he seemed to have thought of something and he suddenly chuckled. He knew who this Uzun First Prince was. Of the princes of the Uzun Empire, this was the one who actively advocated war against the Tang dynasty. Almost all of the decisions related to the Tang dynasty had this Uzun First Prince in it. But ironically, the next Senpo of the Uzun Empire wasn't this fervent prince who was determined to defend his empire and felt that he deserved to inherit the throne. Moreover, if Wang Chong's guess was right, this earnest, aggressive, and arrogant first prince was probably already stirring up something else in the capital. "Where is that first prince?" Wang Chong asked concisely. "Northern City." The eagle immediately replied. "Let's go." Wang Chong urged his horse forward. Setting off from the city gate, passing through many alleys and streets, in the northern district of the Tang dynasty, between the Court of Judicial Review and the Imperial City, Wang Chong finally found an Uzun diplomatic mission. This was a massive training ground in the northern district, a place where the imperial army, the nobles, the scions of the great clans, and the young geniuses of the capital could exchange pointers. It was a training ground donated by His Majesty when he was young. When this training ground was first built, it had been bustling with activity. The scions of the great clans and nobles came here to train and nurture many of the talents of the Tang dynasty. But the Tang dynasty had been at peace for several decades, and the culture of martial arts was no longer as prosperous as it once was. The scions of the great clans and nobles who usually came here to train were few and far between. In Wang Chong's memory, this place should have been rather deserted. But when he actually arrived, Wang Chong realized that he was completely wrong. The training ground before him was packed with people. There was even a large number of Imperial Army members maintaining order at the perimeter. All kinds of flags representing the various branches of the Imperial Army were planted in the surroundings. And within the training ground, there were countless scions of the great clans and nobles clenching their fists and palms. Furious expressions could be seen on their faces. Long. When Wang Chong brought Huang Qian and the others to the perimeter, they couldn't even see what was going on inside. All they could hear was the rumbling of the ground and the trembling of the mountains. Ugh! A violent impact sound came from inside, as if two mountains had collided heavily. Only a mournful scream of death could be heard, and then everything became silent. Damn it! Bastards! This isn't fair. Those bastards from the Chamberlain of Dependencies. All of them only know how to threaten their own people. All of them deserve to die. Indignant roars echoed from the crowd. Cunis. Kilinaros. Ziana. The galloping of hooves and gleeful shouts that were clearly not in the language of the Central Plains sounded from within. Even those who didn't understand the Uzun language could understand the insults, disdain, and flaunting in those shouts. The crowd immediately grew even more furious. Kill him! Kill those barbarians! Bastards! Are there so many experts in the capital of our Tang dynasty that none of them are capable of dealing with these barbarians? This is already the 33rd. Damn it, I'll give 1,000 taels of gold to whoever kills this bastard. I'll pay 2,000 taels. I'll pay 5,000 taels. As long as someone can kill him. The crowd grew furious once more. All of the scions and nobles around the training ground began to curse, and the crowd grew even more ferocious. Audacious! Just when the crowd's rage reached a boiling point, a loud bellow sounded. At the edge of the training ground, an expert dressed in the uniform of the Chamberlain of Dependencies popped his head out from a building with a stern expression. Injuries are inevitable in a duel, and death is unavoidable. This is the first prince of the Uzun Empire, as well as a member of the envoy. If you injure the first prince of the Uzun Empire and incite a war between the two countries, will you be able to bear the consequences? Everyone listen up. The first prince of the Uzun Empire can only be captured alive. Otherwise, all of you will be severely punished. At the end of his words, his expression was stern. The originally noisy and indignant training ground suddenly quietened down. Many pairs of eyes stared at the expert from the Chamberlain of Dependencies in the two buildings, fear in their eyes. These fellows are going too far. They can only be captured alive, and they mustn't be harmed in the slightest. How are we supposed to fight with such restrictions? Even though Huang Qian'er had just arrived, and she didn't even know what was going on in the training ground, she couldn't help but feel a tinge of anger in her eyes when she heard those words. Huang Qian'er rarely came into contact with the affairs of the Uzun envoy. However, she had a deep understanding of the martial arts. If two people were to fight, and one of them was fearless, able to use all kinds of means at will, while the other party was restrained, only able to capture the other party alive. If so, there was no way they could fight. Even if they had 100% of their strength, they wouldn't even be able to bring out 30% of it. This was because they could easily injure the other party. There was no fairness in such a battle. Hee, Chamberlain of Dependencies, what's so strange about such a situation? Chapter 411. In the Empire, the reputation of the Chamberlain of Dependencies had long ago been tarnished. The Chamberlain of Dependencies was tasked with receiving foreign countries and handling matters of etiquette. It only needed to answer to the Son of Heaven. It had little interaction with the nobles, the scions of the great clans, or the common people. Thus, the Chamberlain of Dependencies tended to favor the foreign countries. Wang Chong was not at all surprised that the Chamberlain of Dependencies would appear in a place like this. Buzz! As he was speaking with Huang Qian'er, the crowd began to stir. The densely packed crowd suddenly parted like waves, and several guards of the training field dragged a man and a horse's blood-stained corpse out from inside. Behind them, the ground was smeared with scarlet, leaving an obvious long trail of blood. The stench of blood assailed Huang Qian'er's nostrils. Looking at the man's wide-open eyes, gaping mouth, and the gaping hole in his chest, Huang Qian'er hurriedly turned her head away, unable to bear the sight of it. It's the Imperial Army! On the other side, Wang Chang's expression darkened. In his last life, he had actually heard about this incident in the northern part of the capital. But hearing about it was one thing, and seeing it for himself was another. This young imperial soldier was said to have died at the hands of Uzun's men, but in truth he had died at the hands of the Chamberlain of Dependencies. Bastards, those bastards of the Chamberlain of Dependencies really should be fed to the dogs. They're protecting these foreigners everywhere. Don't tell me they took their money. The spies of the Tang dynasty are probably all in the Chamberlain of Dependencies. These bastards only know how to bully the people of the capital. If they like the foreigners so much, send them to the foreigners. The sight of the bloody corpses once more stirred the crowd. Prince, did you hear that? Did you hear that? We haven't even started fighting, but the people of the Tang dynasty are already making a ruckus. In the inner circle of the practice ground stood a muscular and majestic figure. Uzun Imperial Great General Dusong Mengpoj smirked as he listened to the curses of the men around him. The challenge this time was the result of the first prince's willful actions. Dusong Mangpoj had no interest in this sort of competition, which was like a fight between children. It couldn't be said to be in favor, but it couldn't be said to be against either. But now, Dusong Mangpoj had discovered a little joy. They were the ones who killed people, and the people who died were also people of the Tang dynasty. But in the end, the two sides of the Tang dynasty started cursing each other. Hee, what do you think, Lord Dusong? My suggestion isn't bad, right? I've said it before, our operation this time will be more daunting than dangerous. Wrong, he wasn't shocked at all. The current Tang dynasty was no longer the Tang dynasty of the past. They are no longer qualified to be our opponents. The eldest prince said proudly as he rode on his highland steed. These words were all spoken in the Uzun language. First prince, don't be too careless. There was a saying in the Middle Earth, a skinny camel is still bigger than a horse, and a centipede is still alive. It's true that the Tang dynasty isn't as powerful as it used to be, but it can't be underestimated. Dusong Mangpoj said. He still maintained a cautious attitude toward the Tang dynasty, but there was one thing he had to admit. After entering the Tang dynasty twice, the current Tang dynasty was no longer that powerful, valiant, and warring empire of the past. It had already lost its sharpness and aggressive spirit. Haha, great general, be at ease. I know what to do. Once today is over, we will leave the Tang dynasty and return to the empire. After 3 months, we can go back and report on our mission. The eldest prince heartily laughed. Dusong Mangpoj nodded and gestured to the side. An Uzun horseman patted the back of his horse and galloped around the practice ground. The Tang people of the Central Plains, listen up. First Prince has said that the experts of your Central Plains can't even take a single blow. Don't say that we Uzun look down on you, but is there anyone else? Is there anyone in the younger generation of the Central Plains who can fight? First Prince will give you one more chance. If there is no one who will fight, First Prince will leave. The Uzun horseman galloped, but this time, he was not speaking in Uzun, but in the language of the Central Plains. His voice was shaky and his accent strange. But everyone could understand what he was saying. Boom! The unbridled voice of the Uzun soldiers once more set the crowd abuzz. It had always been the Tang dynasty who bullied others, even if the Uzun soldiers had bullied them to their doorstep and acted so impudently in a place like the capital. A few people were already stamping with rage. Fight! Everyone hurry and fight! Is there a formidable expert? Hurry and capture him! The crowd began to look around. A few of the more powerful scions immediately found it hard to hold back, but just as they were about to walk out, they were pulled back by their clansmen. You're crazy! That's the first Prince of Uzun we're talking about. The Chamberlain of Dependencies is a small matter, but if you really injure the first prince and incite a war between the Uzun and the Tang dynasty, can you bear the consequences of this? Can your clan bear the consequences? Bastard! Are you trying to bring about the destruction of our clan for your own selfish desires? That stern look on his face cooled down the passion that had just been boiling. In the crowd, some of the more powerful scions immediately stopped in their tracks. Standing at the periphery of the crowd, Wang Chong listened and watched, and a hint of worry flashed through his eyes. A single first prince of Uzun couldn't shake the foundation of the Tang dynasty, and a single imperial army expert wasn't enough to deal a heavy blow to the empire. Frankly speaking, even the Chamberlain of Dependencies policy of flattering the enemy wasn't enough to affect the outcome of a single battle for the Tang dynasty. These were all insignificant matters in the capital. What Wang Chong was worried about was something else: the human heart. When a person was wounded by a saber and a sword, blood would flow out, and it would be visible very quickly. It was impossible to see the trauma of the human heart. Rome wasn't built in a single day. The collapse of an empire wasn't something that happened overnight. Before anything fermented, there would always be subtle signs. And the human heart was the source of all these signs. When the people from the Chamberlain of Dependencies issued these orders, they didn't know how much of a blow this matter had dealt to the people of the empire. These spectators, who had backed down due to their apprehensions, also didn't know how much of a blow this matter had dealt to the people of the empire. Only after this incident, many years later, When they looked back, would they suddenly realize how great of a wound this matter had dealt to the hearts of the people of the empire? There had never been a person who could kill and injure so many people in a strategic location like the capital and still leave successfully. And in the entire Central Plains, beneath the feet of the Son of Heaven, there wasn't a single person who could defeat him. Challenges from foreign countries and who had happened before in the capital, but this was the first time that a foreigner, had won a complete and overwhelming victory in a challenge to the Central Plains. This was a complete humiliation to the Tang dynasty. The people of the Tang dynasty were proud, so this matter dealt an even greater blow to the hearts of the people of the empire. Although first Prince Uzun had used his identity as a factor, and the Chamberlain of Dependencies was also a factor, once this matter spread, those who heard it wouldn't know any of this. They would only know that, beneath the feet of the Son of Heaven, where all the geniuses and elites of the Tang dynasty had gathered, so many people had been unable to deal with a single Uzun. The hearts of the people had suffered a deep setback. Coupled with the subsequent defeats, the once proud, dignified and self-confident people of the Tang dynasty had been beaten to the bottom of the valley. They were filled with lack of confidence, even inferiority, and even self-doubt. With the hearts of the people scattered, this was the true collapse of the empire. This also made Wang Chong's heart ache. There was a deep reason why Wang Chong had run over to deal with the Uzun instead of the fifth prince's matter. When he first heard about the matter of the Uzun diplomatic mission, Wang Chong already had his suspicions. And the eagle's words only confirmed his suspicions. "The eagle, is my armor ready?" Wang Chong suddenly said from his horse. "It's ready." The eagle nodded and solemnly said, "According to young master's orders, I've already had the Zhang clan ship it over." Wang Chong gave a slight nod, a satisfied look in his eyes. After several months, the massive deep-sea Xian metal gate that had been discovered in the base of the Iron Cloak Highwayman had finally been successfully shipped back to the capital, to the territory of the Zhang clan. The capital's Zhang clan attached great importance to this 7,000 to 8,000 gene deep-sea Xian metal gate. When they were transporting the Iron Gate, they sent elders to escort it. When it arrived at the capital's Zhang clan, they had even gathered the most elite swordsmiths of the clan's elders to personally oversee this matter. Even the head of the Zhang clan was involved. A strategic material like deep-sea Xian metal was no trifling matter. Not to mention, what Wang Chong had discovered was 7,000 to 8,000 gene, enough to forge 70 to 80 sets of deep-sea Xian metal heavy armor. In any empire, this sort of material was of great importance and couldn't be underestimated. If not for Wang Chong, even the capital's Zhang clan wouldn't have the right to come into contact with this material. Thus, it was easy to imagine how much importance the Zhang clan placed on this matter. The head of the Zhang clan personally supervised the forging of the first set of armor for Wang Chong's personal use. Wang Chong's original intention was to just forge a set of armor. However, the head of the Zhang clan sent a letter saying that he would use the best swordsmiths and find the best inscriptionists to add the best and most sturdy inscriptions to Wang Chong's armor. This was to show the respect and sincerity the Zhang clan had for Wang Chong. Chapter 412. What are you planning to do? A voice suddenly sounded from the side. Huang Qian'e looked at Wang Chong warily. She had been by Wang Chong's side all this time, so she had heard the conversation between Wang Chong and the eagle loud and clear. "Hee, I'm just doing what I should." Wang Chong sat on his horse and replied calmly. Seeing the disciples of the Zhang clan approaching from afar, he hurriedly beckoned them over. "You aren't a match for him. You saw that Imperial Guard too. His cultivation was higher than yours, but he still died at the hands of that Uzun first prince." Huang Qian'e was extremely wary of Wang Chong's actions. Her mission was to ensure Wang Chong's safety, not to send him to his death. "That person isn't someone you can deal with. You underestimate me too much." Wang Chong grinned as he leisurely and unhurriedly took off his robe. At the same time, he indicated for the Zhang clan disciples to open the chest and hand over the deep-sea Xian metal upper body armor to him. The Zhang clan had indeed put a lot of effort into this armor. As Wang Chong weighed it in his hand, he immediately felt his hand sink, as if it weighed more than 100 gene. Be it in terms of shape or sturdiness, the armor looked extremely powerful. It felt like a miniature fortress. Wang Chong raised the armor above his head and quickly put it on. An exceptionally comfortable feeling came from his body, like a fish in the water or a bird in the forest. It was a perfect fit. Since I'm prepared to go on stage, it means that I'm confident in my chances of victory. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done this. Furthermore, if I don't go on stage, are you prepared to take my place? Wang Chong turned to look at Huang Qian'er, a faint smile on his face. Huang Qian'er opened her mouth, but just as she was about to speak, she hesitated. There were so many people present, and so many experts, but no one made a move. This was not without reason. Defeating this Yusang first prince was not difficult, but the problem was that if they accidentally injured him or killed him, it would incite a war between the two countries. No one present would be able to bear the consequences of such a thing. The reason why Huang Qian'er was at Wang Chong's side was to ensure the safety of the Huang clan, not to kill a prince and bring disaster upon the Huang clan. That's it. Wang Chong smiled faintly. He quickly took the other helmet from the Zhang clan's disciple and put it on his head. Boom! Right at this moment, an earth-shattering roar suddenly came from the center of the crowd, and the originally quiet practice field suddenly boiled up again. Let's go in and have a look. Wang Chong's expression changed. Without thinking, he immediately spurred his horse into the training field. Flashing his token, Wang Chong's group successfully squeezed in. Sweeping his gaze across the surroundings, Wang Chong suddenly soared into the air and landed on the roof of a nearby building. From his vantage point, Wang Chong could clearly see what was going on in the practice ground. Wang Chong's intuition was right. In the end, there was still someone who could no longer hold back his anger and charged into the training field. Come, foreign barbarians, today, I'll let you know the prowess of the Central Plains. On the massive training field, a furious voice reverberated in the air. Galloping, Wang Chong could see a fully armored young man wielding a large spear. He was currently charging at the Tibetan crown prince, his horse stirring up a thick plume of smoke as he thrusted it toward the Tibetan crown prince. His aura was unstoppable, as though he was unstoppable. But in the next moment, the crowd broke into an uproar, and an infuriating sight occurred. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, a figure galloped forward. The first prince of Uzun didn't dodge. Instead, he charged straight at the tip of the spear of the scion, as though he was courting death. Bastard! The scion was taken aback. His goal was to teach the first prince of Uzun a lesson, not to kill him. In the blink of an eye, he pulled on the reins of his horse and charged to the side. The war steed neighed, and its four legs seemed to have stiffened as it charged forward. There was a flash of blood. Before the scion could do anything, his chest was struck by a saber, and blood spurted out. Despicable, shameless. He's using this move again. What kind of ability is this to use such shameless methods? Do these Uzun barbarians even know the rules? He's doing this because he knows that we don't dare to hurt him. That bastard! To think that the great first prince of Uzun would be like this. That in the training field, everyone was furious when they saw this scene. In a war between two countries, the weak are prey to the strong, and the winner is king. That's how it is between countries, and it should be the same in a contest of martial arts. What do you mean by stopping when the time is right, benevolence, righteousness, propriety, and wisdom? It's ridiculous for the Central Plains to have such a rule. I didn't ask you to give way to me. Who can you blame if you want to do this? On the other side, the first prince of Uzun turned his horse around. Listening to the crowd's furious curses, he sneered in his heart, but he didn't care. He wasn't a member of the Tang dynasty, so it didn't matter if he was cursed by foreigners. He wouldn't lose a strand of skin anyway. Come on. Since you're courting death, I'll fulfill your wish. With his eyes fixed on the scion in the distance, the first prince of Uzun smiled sinisterly. He urged his highland steed to attack. But just like before, the first prince of Uzun left himself wide open. He attacked with all his might, not caring about defense at all. In an instant, the expression of the young man who looked like a descendant of an aristocratic family turned extremely ugly. Do you still think that I can't kill him? Wang Chong, who was clinging to the edge of the building, spoke without turning his head, the sound of clothes rustling through the air accompanied by an alluring fragrance. This person can't be touched. Don't you see that there are so many people standing there? It's not that we can't deal with him, but that we can't touch him. Even if your Wang clan is a clan of ministers and generals, even if your grandfather's name is known throughout the world, the consequences aren't something your Wang clan can bear. Huang Qian'er said with a cold expression. Not too long after Wang Chong flew over, she attached herself to him as well. That's because you know too little about me. Don't you know? The more unkillable a person is, the more I like to kill him. Wang Chong looked at the Highland steed in the training field, a mocking smile on his lips, as if he was looking at a person who was about to die. What a clever strategy! Wang Chong watched as the Uzun First Prince used his body as a shield and charged forward, completely disregarding his own life. Wang Chong couldn't help but sneer coldly. A duel of martial arts was a battle of life and death. Why would there be so many rules? In this aspect, he actually quite admired this Uzun First Prince. But while this method of using one's body to threaten others might work, it was completely useless against him. So, loosening his grip, Wang Chong quickly jumped down from the building and landed back on his steed. The battle was already over, and on the training field, the scion was already in dire straits. His body was riddled with wounds, and his death was inevitable. It's my turn. Wang Chong urged his steed forward. Wait a moment. Huang Qian'er jumped down from the building and was just about to stop Wang Chong when the eagle stopped her. Young miss, don't worry. Gongzi has a clear goal in his actions, and he would never do something that he isn't confident of. Naturally, he has his reasons for making a move. I hope that young miss can maintain her trust in Gongzi. The eagle said solemnly. The operation of the Goguryeo assassins had already forged the eagle's absolute trust in Wang Chong. Furthermore, the eagle's trust wasn't that blind either. Wang Chong was wearing a deep-sea Xian metal armor that was the bane of master archers, and there were a large number of toughening inscriptions inscribed on it. Even a full-powered arrow from a master archer wouldn't be able to pierce through it, needless to say, the swords and sabers of the Uzun. On top of that, the eagle wasn't a foolhardy individual either. He had already mobilized a master archer outside to await his orders. If anything were to happen, Wang Chong's deep-sea Xian metal armor and the master archer's arrows would be more than enough to save him. On the training ground, Li Chen had never imagined that he would exhaust his stamina to such an extent in just a few short exchanges. Large beads of sweat dripped down from his forehead, nose bridge, and chin. Salty sweat seeped into his eyes, blurring his vision. The small spear in his hand felt unprecedentedly heavy. The pungent scent of blood wafted into his nose. Li Chen knew that this blood was all his. Bastard! Li Chen clenched his teeth and cursed in his heart. He suddenly felt a tinge of regret. Not for his arrogance, but for underestimating the other party's shamelessness. In the past few days of challenges, the other party had grasped the mentality of the crowd, and he had grasped the advantage of the Chamberlain of Dependencies. He had been using his body to block, to knock, to stick, to snatch. In any case, he was using all sorts of self-harming methods to make Li Chen hesitate. On the other hand, he was using his full strength, resorting to all means. This wasn't a fair fight. Li Chen also knew that he couldn't hold on for much longer. What flowed out of his body was not only his blood, but also his stamina and stellar energy. Li Chen wanted to end this, but with so many people watching, he couldn't easily back down. Moreover, his strong pride wouldn't allow him to do so. Enough. Go down. Just as Li Chen was feeling extremely tormented and finding it hard to persevere, a voice suddenly came from the crowd. With the clatter of hooves, a fully armored figure suddenly spurred his horse out from the crowd. Wang Chong dismounted from his white-hoofed shadow. Clad in deep-sea Xian metal armor, he was armed to the teeth. Wielding the silver spear made from Wuzi steel, he slowly spurred his horse towards the training ground. Bzz. In that instant, the huge training field suddenly quietened down. After Wang Chong appeared, everyone simultaneously let out a long sigh of relief. Chapter 413. Ha! On the other side, the first prince of Uzun sneered. The battle was already nearing its end. He was about to enjoy the joy of victory. How could he be disturbed by a single person's words? Nay! The war horse neighed. The first prince of Uzun became one with his horse, turning into a cloud of dust as he charged straight at Li Chen. Wang Chong sneered as if he had already expected this. He straightened his right hand. Boom! The next moment, it was as if a clap of thunder had streaked across the sky. A thick iron arrow streaked across half of the training ground, brushing past the first prince of Uzun's horse and stabbing into the ground. Nei's Highland steed neighed and reared. On its back, the first prince of Uzun had an extremely ugly expression. Bastard! Before the first prince of Uzun could launch an attack, an angry roar suddenly erupted from the golden-roofed building at the edge of the training ground. Wang Chong's arrow had not injured the first prince of Uzun, but it had angered the official from the office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies. Where did this bastard come from? Did you not understand what I said? Do not harm Prince Uzun. Do not harm Prince Uzun. Are you deaf? If a member of the diplomatic mission is injured, it will cause a dispute between the two countries. Which bastard are you from? Are you ignoring the words of the office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies? The official from the office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies was furious. They had already warned him time and time again, and had even sent imperial soldiers to stand guard here. Who would have thought that someone would not listen to them? Guards! Hurry and take him away! At the edge of the railing, the official stretched out his index finger and pointed at Wang Chong. His face was ashen as he shouted. The crowd at the edge of the training ground was in an uproar. Several imperial soldiers immediately rushed towards Wang Chong. On the other side, the first prince of Uzun also had an ugly expression. That arrow just now had not been merciful. Had it not been for his quick reaction, he would have been shot. Sharpshooter! The eldest prince of Uzun turned his head abruptly and glared fiercely at Wang Chong, who was standing at the edge of the training field. His hatred was instantly attracted to Wang Chong. At the same time, everyone in the training field was attracted by Wang Chong. I've said it before, this battle is over. Even if you pretend not to understand. Then I'll say it again. Didn't Uzun want to meet the young elites of the Chinese server and find someone who can defeat you? Then you have got your wish. The people of Uzun have always advocated martial prowess. Don't tell me they only have this little ability and only know how to bully the weak? Wang Chong urged his horse forward calmly. His first sentence was in the language of the Central Plains, but the next sentence was in the language of Uzun. Buzz! When Wang Chong spoke a string of fluent words in Uzun, the furious Uzun first prince and even the Uzun great general Dusong Mangpoj and the other Uzun warriors paled in fright. The Tang dynasty of the Central Plains regarded the Uzun as barbarians and treated them with disdain, so no one would ever learn the language of Uzun. Other than the few people from the Chamberlain of Dependencies, this was the first time they had encountered someone who could speak the language of Uzun in the Central Plains. This was not a very good feeling. Moreover, this meant that they could no longer use the language of Uzun in front of these people of the Tang dynasty. Who are you? Why do you speak the language of our Uzun? The Uzun first prince narrowed his eyes and finally turned around. He was far more interested in this fully armored knight of the Tang dynasty than anyone else. In fact, he was even more interested in killing the scion of the great Tang who had already lost the ability to fight back. Moreover, even if you want to go up, that's fine. You should know the rules of our competition. Only those under the age of 26 have the right to participate in this challenge. The Tang dynasty of the Central Plains is said to be a land of heroes, a gathering of heroes. They shouldn't even need to cheat in this sort of challenge. The Uzun first prince had a proud expression, but his eyes glimmered with a cunning light. What are you standing around for? Hurry up and capture him. A harsh voice rang out in his ear as footsteps rumbled behind him. Several powerful auras were rapidly approaching. Wang Chong chuckled. Without even turning his head, his hand shook, and a dazzling token flew out and landed in front of two imperial soldiers. Looking at the lifelike dragon on the token, the imperial army soldiers shuddered and came to an abrupt halt. Haha, didn't you want to know who I am? As you wish, I'll tell you. Wang Chong looked at the Uzun First Prince, his eyes sharp and perceptive. He already knew what the Uzun First Prince was thinking. His right hand grabbed the edge of his helmet and forcefully put it on. His long black hair fell down, revealing the face of a fair-skinned, handsome youth beneath the sturdy armor. Seeing this extraordinarily young face, a burst of soft exclamations suddenly came from all around. In the building at the edge of the practice field, an official of the Chamberlain of Dependencies, who had been sitting calmly and motionlessly like Mount Tai, suddenly sat up. His entire body seemed to have been shocked by electricity, and his expression abruptly changed. It's him. At this moment, he finally recognized the person who had suddenly appeared on the practice field to stir up trouble. If there was one person in the Chamberlain of Dependencies who was most disliked and unwelcomed, then it was undoubtedly this youth. Whether it was the regional commander's incident or the Goguryeo assassins, Wang Chong's every action had easily nullified the efforts of the Chamberlain of Dependencies. The Wang clan had obtained the honor and reputation they wanted, but in order to make up for the unease they had caused in the capital, the Chamberlain of Dependencies had expended a great deal of energy and money to appease the envoys of the other countries and the Hu and foreigners in the capital. They had to convince them that this was just a coincidence and that the empire's policies toward the other countries would not change. Without question, everyone in the Chamberlain of Dependencies agreed that the most unwelcome person was the youngest son of the Wang clan. Bastard! Didn't I tell them? We can't let this young master of the Wang clan get close. How did he manage to sneak in? The veins on the forehead of the authoritative official of the Chamberlain of Dependencies were throbbing. He suddenly had an ill foreboding. The matter at the practice field was about to get out of hand. Wherever this young master of the Wang clan appeared, it would always be a mess. Stop him. No matter what, we can't let him injure the first Prince of Uzun. The official said as he pinched his forehead. "Milord, I'm afraid that it's already too late." An expert of the Chamberlain of Dependencies said as he watched the two approaching figures, his face fraught with worry. "Neither the people of Uzun nor that brat will agree with us. Moreover, that Wang Chong still has the token of the King of Song." These last words struck at the Achilles heel of that imposing figure. Like a punctured rubber ball, he slumped back into his seat in disappointment. The token of the King of Song. It was like a mighty wall blocking all his thoughts. There's no need to worry. The mighty Tang dynasty doesn't need to send anyone formidable to deal with you. Sending me alone is enough. Wang Chong didn't know that an official of the Chamberlain of Dependencies was watching him from a building at the edge. As he spoke, Wang Chong put on his deep-sea Xian iron helmet, revealing only his eyes. Then he urged his horse forward. "Arrogant. Since you want to die, I'll grant your wish." A sinister look appeared in the eyes of the first Prince of Uzun. Without another word, he urged his horse forward, heading to the other side of the practice field. Wang Chong's gaze swept over. Seeing the defeated scion being carried off the practice field, he smiled coldly and urged his horse to the other side. Wang Chong's body didn't emit any aura. This made it impossible for the first Prince of Uzun to see through him, and for a moment, he couldn't tell how strong he was. The two of them, one on the east and one on the west, faced each other across the huge practice field. The atmosphere instantly tensed. The eagle, Huang Qianhe, the official of the Chamberlain of Dependencies, Dusong Mengpoj, and all the scions around the practice field focused their gazes on these two. The sound of falling leaves could be heard. Swoosh! Wang Chong placed his hands in front of him, his woozy steel spear aimed at the distant first Prince of Uzun. "Umph!" Wang Chong sneered, his entire body vibrating with stellar energy, his aura suddenly becoming somber and somber. He had not come to take revenge for what had happened on the road to the west. To provoke him in the capital like this, these Uzun people were far too arrogant. Not even the people of the Chamberlain of Dependencies would be able to protect them. Boom! The earth quaked, and a moment later, the white-hoofed shadow exerted strength on its limbs, bringing Wang Chong with it as it charged toward the first Prince of Uzun like a bolt of lightning. "Come!" The Uzun first prince savagely grinned. At the same time, his highland steed neighed and shot forward with a similarly majestic aura. In a short period of time, the two warhorses had reached their maximum speed. 40 zhang, 30 zhang. Boom! There was a metallic clattering that shook the earth. Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong released the halo of Dusk Stallion from his body. A massive halo expanded from Wang Chong's body to the white-hoofed shadow's feet and then began to expand. This massive halo weighed 1,000 jun, causing the earth to slightly sink. Bzz. After the first halo, there was a flash of light as another halo shot out. Haha. The sight of the halo beneath Wang Chong's hooves caused a chorus of laughter to erupt from the practice field. Kid, so this is all you've got? And here I was wondering how formidable you were. You're dead for sure. Amidst the fierce neighing of a horse, there was a flash of light. The space behind the Yusang First Prince turned dark, and in this darkness, a massive black yak could be faintly seen. In a flash, it had burrowed into the highland steed beneath the Yusang First Prince. The Uzun First Prince's speed instantly increased. At the same time, there was a metallic clattering. 1, 2, 3, 5 halos began to expand from beneath the hooves of the Uzun First Prince's highland steed. Boom! The air rumbled as the two men and their horses reached their maximum speed. Like two comets streaking across the sky, they charged at each other with indomitable will. They did not hold anything back, nor did they hesitate. Chapter 4:14. Not good. In the crowd, Huang Qian'er's expression tightened at this sight, and her heartstrings tightened. Given the Uzun First Prince's strength, there was no way Wang Chong would be a match for him. At the same time, a worried look appeared in Old Eagle's eyes. Although he spoke calmly, the anxiety in his heart was no less than Huang Qian'er's. The crowd around the practice ground let out cries of alarm. This kid is dead for sure. A group of Uzun envoys gathered together and sneered. They looked at Wang Chong as if he were a dead man. No one was optimistic about Wang Chong's chances. Even those who wished for the first prince to be defeated could see this. In his current state, Wang Chong was definitely no match for the Uzun First Prince. You brought this upon yourself. You can't blame me for this. On a building at the edge of the practice ground, a figure from the Chamberlain of Dependencies leaned on the railing with both hands and sneered. The Chamberlain of Dependencies could not deal with Wang Chong, but if Wang Chong was courting death, then they could not be blamed. Even if the Sage Emperor came, he wouldn't be able to blame them. At this time, the only person who still had confidence in Wang Chong was probably himself. 20 zhang. 10 zhang. 8 zhang. Time seemed to slow down countless times. Wang Chong's eyes were clear. Just when he was 6 zhang away from the Uzun First Prince, Wang Chong's eyes flashed with a cold light, and then something strange happened. With a shake of Wang Chong's hand, a cold light shot through the air at lightning speed. However, this cold light was not aimed at the Uzun First Prince, but at the highland steed beneath the Uzun First Prince. Buzz. In the blink of an eye, Wang Chong's Gangqi iron cloak, which was the size of a wicker basket, sank into the highland steed's open mouth and into its stomach. At such a short distance, even the eldest prince of Uzun could not react in time. Chi! Just as the two were about to collide, the white-hoofed shadow, which had reached its peak speed and was almost impossible to change its direction, suddenly swerved, drawing an arc in the air by a hair's breadth and passing by First Prince Uzun several zhang away. This move not only stunned the audience, but even the eldest prince of Uzun was shocked. Therefore, the faster the speed, the harder it was to change direction in a short period of time. Because the huge inertia was not that easy to eliminate. The result of abruptly changing direction would only cause the warhorse to be unable to support its own inertia. In the end, its bones would break and it would fall. This was not something an ordinary warhorse could do. Rumble! Before there was time to think, the highland steed beneath the Uzun First Prince neighed, and then, like a rolling rock, it tumbled away with the Uzun First Prince. Whoosh! At almost the same time, after charging Tensum Zhang, Wang Chong suddenly made an S-turn and immediately turned back. Not only did he not slow down, he actually increased his speed. Man and spear were one, and the silver tip of the spear was pointed at the distant Uzun First Prince, who had just stood up from the corpse of his steed. Not good. Serpentine circle. How could this young man have such a high-level horsemanship? In the distance, the Uzun Great General Dusong Mangpo's pupils constricted when he saw Wang Chong use this move. He instantly recognized this exquisite horsemanship technique that Wang Chong was using, and his entire body paled. Serpentine circle. This was one of the best horsemanship techniques in the world. In a narrow range, these top-class riders could temporarily increase their speed without slowing down or stopping, and at the same time, make a 180-degree turn. On the battlefield, where cavalry reigned supreme, one could easily imagine the usefulness of this horsemanship technique. But whether it was in the Tang dynasty or in the Uzun, this horsemanship technique was not something that an ordinary person could grasp. At the very least, one needed to be at the level of a general to be able to control a warhorse to such an exquisite level. No matter what, this was not something that an ordinary youth of a great clan or a scion of the capital could grasp. Wang Chong was simply too skilled at using this technique. An intense sense of danger welled up in Dusong Mangpo's heart, and he immediately shot out of the crowd. Dusong Mangpo's reaction was very fast, but Wang Chong's was even faster. Rumble! On the massive practice ground, Wang Chong's steed left a trail of dust in his wake, the earth cracking and the heavens collapsing. With the speed of the white-hoofed shadow, the halo of Dusk Stallion, and Wang Chong's own strength, at this moment, Wang Chong had the strength to contend against a true martial Tier 5 expert. Come! Wang Chong fiercely bellowed, the silver spear in his hand exploding with dazzling light. At this moment, Wang Chong exuded an awe-inspiring divine might, a god of war. Meanwhile, on the practice ground, the Uzun First Prince, whose warhorse had been killed, gave a cold and sinister laugh as he suddenly did something that no one had expected. In the face of Wang Chong's full-strength attack, not only did he not retreat, he even unsheathed his saber and slashed at Wang Chong with all his strength, completely disregarding the openings that had appeared on his body. Bastard! Despicable! Shameless! He's using this move again. The crowd on the practice ground was infuriated by this sight, and they began to curse. They were all too familiar with this sight. The Uzun First Prince was clearly playing the same old trick. He wanted to use his body as a shield, using the method he had used against the scions of the great clans to deal with Wang Chong. You're courting death. No one can blame you for this. Wang Chong couldn't help but sneer at this sight, staring at the Uzun First Prince like he was a dead man. If the Uzun First Prince wanted to use this move against him, he had truly found the wrong person. Others might not dare to kill him for fear of harming him. But he, Wang Chong, was not one of them. Rumble! With a heaven-shaking boom, Wang Chong and his horse finally collided in midair with the Uzun First Prince. Like two comets colliding in midair, a peerless shockwave swept through the practice ground like a gale sweeping up fallen leaves. Boom! At the moment when the man and the horse collided, Wang Chong suddenly bounced off the horse's back. Clang! Before the crowd could react, a cold light flashed. Wang Chong's woozy steel sword pierced the Uzun First Prince's 100 acupoints on the top of his head. Time froze. Dark red blood gushed down from the top of the Uzun First Prince's head like a fountain, drowning his eyes, brows, nose, and lips. The Uzun First Prince's eyes were wide open, and his lips were trembling, but he couldn't say a word. Boom! Boom! His body fell down like a wooden stake. Until the end, the Uzun First Prince's eyes were wide open, as if he couldn't believe that Wang Chong really dared to kill him. The two countries were at odds. In the war between the Uzun Empire and the Tang dynasty, millions of civilians were involved, and countless soldiers died on the battlefield. Wasn't he afraid? Didn't he know the consequences? He actually really dared to kill him. Boom! After a brief silence, a tsunami of cheers erupted from the practice ground. At this moment, whether they knew Wang Chong or not, no matter which aristocratic family they belonged to, they couldn't help but raise their arms and cheer excitedly. Wang Chong did it. Wang Chong actually killed the arrogant first prince of Uzun. Kacha! A wooden railing fell. An official from the Chamberlain of Dependencies, who was in a nearby building, slammed his palm on the railing. Bastard! The Wang family! Is the Wang family rebelling? The official's face turned purple, and the veins on his palm, which was clenched on the railing, bulged. Due to excessive shock and anger, his body trembled in agitation. First Prince of Uzun. First Prince of Uzun. That bastard of the Wang family had actually killed him. This was a calamity of the heavens. Did he even know what he had done? In that instant he felt like he couldn't even stand straight, as if the sky was about to change. In the entire building, anyone from the Chamberlain of Dependencies who had even a little understanding of politics had all turned deathly pale. They already had a premonition that a great calamity was about to befall them. The same paleness appeared on the faces of another group of people. First Prince of Uzun. He actually killed him. Huang Qian'er tightly gripped the edges of her sleeves, her face pale. Wang Chong defeating the stronger should have been something to be happy about, but now, Wang Chong had no choice but to accept it. But now, Huang Qian'er's heart was filled with anxiety because of another matter. The first Prince of Uzun was dead, and killed by Wang Chong at that. She could already foresee a violent storm. And the Wang family was at the center of this storm. The Huang family had just submitted to the Wang family. If the Wang family was swept up in it, the Huang family would not be able to escape either. Wang Chong had been too impulsive. "Kid, take your life." All of a sudden, a furious roar cut through the cheers of the crowd. On the enormous practice ground, a surging torrent of golden stellar energy swept toward Wang Chong like an avalanche. Compared to this destructive energy, the battle between Wang Chong and First Prince of Uzun had been like child's play. This attack had been unleashed in anger, and even steel would have been pulverized, much less flesh and blood. Not good. Alarmed, the eagle immediately raised his arm and sent out a signal. Boom! A thick iron arrow shot toward the practice ground with the speed of a thunderbolt, leaving a long trail of white chi behind it. But when the iron arrow shot by the master archer struck the golden torrent of stellar energy, it clattered like it had struck steel and was sent flying, shattering into pieces in midair. No one had expected that Uzun had hidden such an expert in his ranks. Not even the eagle had been able to react. "Young master," the eagle's heart sank, and he immediately charged forward. But it was already too late. Just when Wang Chong was about to lose his life to the golden torrent of stellar energy, everyone suddenly heard a soft voice. "Dusong Mengpoj." Losing his composure so quickly? Chapter 415. On the practice ground, 10 some zhang away from Wang Chong, Dusong Mengpoj stared in shock at the nearby Tang dynasty youth, his fur coat flapping in the wind. For the first time, a look of shock appeared in his eyes. His trip as a diplomatic envoy had been extremely secretive, and very few people knew of it. Even within the Uzun Empire, not many people knew of it. Dusong Mengpoj had never imagined that the secret he had kept for more than 3 months would be exposed by a youth of the Tang dynasty of unknown origins. At this moment, Dusong Mengpoj's mind was in turmoil. For the first time, he felt like he couldn't see through this youth. But Dusong Mengpoj was far from the only one shocked. Dusong Mengpoj? On a building in the distance, a figure clung tightly to the railing. His eyes were wide open as he looked down at the figure in the square in disbelief. On the battlefield between the Empire and the Uzun, there were very few people who did not know of Dusong Mengpoj. On the Empire's blacklist, this Uzun great general was definitely on it. In the capital of the Empire, there were countless people who wanted his life. Without this person, the Uzun Empire's strength would be greatly weakened. But even though they had heard of Dusong Mengpoj's name, very few people had actually seen him in person. Even if they were in person, not many people would know who he was. The Chamberlain of Dependencies was responsible for receiving the diplomatic missions of the various countries and for dealing with him. The envoy to the Uzun Empire had been arranged by them. But not even they knew that this titan of the Uzun Empire, Dusong Mengpoj, had secretly infiltrated the Tang dynasty. And he had done it right under their noses. "Young man, I don't know what you're talking about," Dusong Mengpoj said, but these words were spoken in the language of the Uzun. His expression was calm, and it took only a few moments for him to return to normal, so fast that one would think that everything that had just happened was an illusion. "Ha! Dusong Mangpoj, do you really not know what I'm saying? Dusong Mangpoj spoke to Wang Chong in Uzun, but Wang Chong did not fall for it. In front of countless scions and nobles, he spoke in the language of the Central Plains. If I remember correctly, the legendary Dusong Mangpoj should be able to speak both the Han and Tibetan languages. Moreover, Dusong Mangpoj, if I were you, I would leave the Tang dynasty as quickly as possible, leave this land of trouble. I would not stay a moment longer in the capital of the Tang dynasty. Wang Chong heartily laughed. Not only did he not retreat, he even led his warhorse forward toward the Uzun great general. Wang Chong had only guessed that Uzun first prince would be accompanied by Uzun great general Dusong Mangpoj. After all, legends were often exaggerated and could not be taken seriously. But Dusong Mangpoj's reaction was enough to explain the problem. If Wang Chong had only been guessing at the start, then now Wang Chong was sure that this Uzun warrior standing in front of him, his aura restrained and his stature not particularly tall, was the Uzun great general Dusong Mangpoj, renowned throughout the world. The Uzun did not have many famous generals, but Dusong Mangpoj was definitely one of them. The Uzun army he led was fierce and valiant, and also extremely intelligent. It did not rely purely on brute force. In the war against the Uzun, the Tang dynasty had always held the advantage. But Dusong Mangpoj's appearance had filled this gap. Many of the empire's generals, high-ranking officers, and seasoned veterans had died at the hands of his army, and the vast majority of these generals and officers had come from the capital's great clans and clans. It could be said that any clan with a descendant serving in the army in the West would hate Dusong Mangpoj to the bone. This person was extremely aggressive and proactive. As long as this person existed, the clans with descendants on the Western Front would continue to suffer massive losses. Wang Chong was sure that there were many scions in the capital, even the emperor himself, who would be more than happy to take Dusong Mangpoj's life. A great general was no trifling matter. Wang Chong was well aware that not even all the experts of the Wang clan would be able to do anything to this great general. But just because he couldn't kill him and the Wang clan couldn't kill him didn't mean that there was no other way. There were plenty of people in the empire that could kill him. As long as he exposed his identity, whether or not he was right, someone else would take care of the rest. You asked for it. Wang Chong inwardly sneered. In normal circumstances, it was almost impossible to deal with a foreign great general like Dusong Mangpoj outside of the battlefield. But he had been too careless, believing that his tracks were well hidden and that no one would recognize him, so he had sneaked into the capital of the Tang dynasty. Young man, what is your name? Dusong Mangpoj spoke in the Uzun language, his eyes glimmering with an inexplicable dangerous light. He already understood the intentions of this youth, and no matter what he said or did, it would be useless. He had already made up his mind to use this method to deal with Wang Chong in front of all these people. At any other time, Dusong Mangpoj would have slapped him to death without even glancing at him. But right now, Dusong Mangpoj only felt a sharp edge, like he had encountered a hedgehog. Wang Chong, you probably don't understand right now, but in the future, you'll definitely understand. Wang Chong proudly smiled as he sat on his horse. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you right now? Dusong Mangpoj narrowed his eyes, still speaking in the Uzun language. One of them spoke in the Uzun language while the other spoke in the language of the Central Plains. They spoke completely different languages, but they had no problem communicating. Afraid. Of course I'm afraid. Wang Chong smiled. But do you believe that if you don't kill me, you still have a chance to leave the Tang dynasty alive? But if you kill me, you won't even be able to leave this practice ground? Dusong Mangpoj narrowed his eyes in silence, his sharp eyes seemingly trying to peer into the depths of Wang Chong's soul. In the 3 months he had spent in the Tang dynasty, this was the first time he had encountered someone he couldn't understand, and it was even a teenager. Killing intent bloomed in his eyes, but Dusong Mangpoj still did not move. He had no confidence, nor could he guess at this youth's background. No matter what this youth's background was, he was right about one thing. Starting from now, the capital of the Central Plains was no longer safe for him. The longer he stayed here, the safer he would be. Young man, I won't kill you this time, because you and your clan will soon be in even greater trouble. Dusong Mangpoj gave Wang Chong said a profound stare. The first prince isn't someone you can kill just because you want to. Ah. Wang Chong almost laughed at Dusong Mangpoj's words. In the end, he was still a great general of the Uzun Empire, a mighty eagle of the plateau, yet he still dared to use such methods in front of him. If Wang Chong didn't know the ins and outs of the matter, he would never have been able to do anything. Great general speaks well. It just so happens that I also have a few words I wish to say to great general. Under the strange gazes of the crowd, Wang Chong suddenly bent down and whispered into the ear of this renowned great general of the Uzun Empire. These words caused Dusong Mangpoj's entire body to tremble, and he raised his head to look at Wang Chong like he had seen a ghost. The indistinct killing intent in his eyes instantly vanished. Ah! Wang Chong suddenly threw his head back and laughed. Slapping his horse, he galloped toward the Uzun diplomatic mission on the other end of the practice ground. In front of the Tensum Uzun cavalry, Wang Chong stopped, a smirk on his lips. Tian. Wang Chong's first words in the Uzun language caused the faces of the Uzun cavalry to change. Be careful of your little brother. It's true that the throne is yours, but alas, you might not have the life to sit on it. Pa. After saying this, Wang Chong roared with laughter. Not lingering any longer, he urged his horse to gallop away. Whether it was the Uzun great general Dusong Mangpoj or the Uzun cavalry on the practice ground, none of them tried to stop him. They just watched as he arrogantly galloped away. Let's go. Dusong Mangpoj's eyes widened as he said this. Carrying the corpse of the Uzun cavalryman killed by Wang Chong, he broke through the crowd and left. This place was no longer safe, even though nothing had happened in the surroundings. But Dusong Mangpoj could already sense an enormous danger. The mission had been a complete failure, and the capital of the Tang dynasty was now fraught with danger. Dusong Mangpoj didn't even know if he could survive to return to the Uzun plateau. Just as that youth had said, every second he spent here was one more second of danger. The Tensum elite Uzun cavalry followed behind Dusong Mangpoj without a single word. Congratulations to user for changing the practice ground event, Uzun's challenge. You have been rewarded with 10 points of destiny energy. Congratulations to user for changing the Uzun royal family war. You have been rewarded with 5 points of destiny energy. Two voices rang out in Wang Chong's mind like heavenly music. Almost at the same time, the originally quiet training field once again exploded into a wave of cheers that soared into the sky. Wang Chong! Wang Chong! Wang Chong! Wave after wave of cheers crashed down like tsunamis. Not many people knew what Wang Chong had just done, but everyone knew that the insufferably arrogant Uzun diplomatic mission had been forced to flee in dejection. And all of this had been accomplished by Duke Jiu's grandson, that Wang Chong of the Wang clan. This is really both fame and fortune. As Wang Chong listened to the cheers of the practice ground, his lips slowly curled into a smile. His trip down the Spirit Vein Mountain was not in vain with the gains he got from the training field. Defeating the Yusang First Prince had been rewarded with 10 points of destiny energy, and speaking those words had been worth 5 points. He had easily earned 15 points of destiny energy from this trip. This was almost as much as the Goguryeo assassin's encirclement. Wang Chong was beginning to realize that as long as he could successfully change the course of events that would have a major impact on the empire, the rewards would be far greater than if he worked alone. Adding on the 79 points of destiny energy from before, I now have 94 points of destiny energy. It's just a pity that Uzun is too far away, the heavens high and the emperor far away. I could only say those words. Otherwise, if I tried to sow discord, I would have gained far more than just 5 points of destiny energy. Wang Chong said to himself, feeling rather regretful. Chapter 416. As Wang Chong walked into the crowd, he was greeted by cheers. No matter what, after so many days, someone had finally done something gratifying. Young master! Amidst the crowd, the eagle's face lit up with joy as he led a group of people to welcome Wang Chong. Only Huang Chenner stood to the side, a look of worry in her eyes. Wang Chong! Just when the crowd was at its most lively and jubilant, a cold voice, like autumn frost, suddenly came from the crowd. Amidst the crowd, protected by the imperial guard, was an ashen official of the Chamberlain of Dependencies. His face was filled with rage as he walked over aggressively, as if he was going to denounce Wang Chong. This time, Wang Chong had barged in uninvited. The people of the Chamberlain of Dependencies had long since tolerated him. It was already quite impressive that they had been able to endure until now. Wang Chong, you sure have guts. Do you know that you've already committed a calamity? Your Wang clan has committed a calamity, and yet you can still laugh here. The cold voice was like a gust of cold wind that swept through the crowd. The area within Zhang immediately fell silent. All eyes turned to the ill-intentioned official of the Chamberlain of Dependencies and Wang Chong. A look of fear appeared in many people's eyes. In the capital, the Chamberlain of Dependencies was a special existence. They did not have any real authority, but they wielded more authority than any other organization. This was because the Chamberlain of Dependencies could bypass the imperial court and directly reach the heavens. Moreover, as long as the Chamberlain of Dependencies needed it, they could act first and report later. This was a privilege that had been bestowed upon the Chamberlain of Dependencies when it was first established. They had enormous authority to complete matters of utmost importance to the imperial family, such as the Mount Tai pilgrimage, the annual temple sacrifices, god sacrifices, and the imperial ancestral temple ceremonies. Every one of these matters was of great significance to the imperial family, so they also bestowed upon the Chamberlain of Dependencies a transcendent power and authority. Although the nobles, scions, and aristocrats were high and mighty in the eyes of the commoners, they were insignificant ants before the Chamberlain of Dependencies. Milord, Wang Chong's actions have not been out of line. I wonder where the Chamberlain of Dependencies' so-called calamity came from? Wang Chong grinned. He saw that the official from the Chamberlain of Dependencies did not retreat, but rather, with a flick of his sleeve, he walked towards the official who seemed to have an extraordinary status. Don't you know what you're saying? The official from the Chamberlain of Dependencies glared at him. If looks could kill, Wang Chong would have died 1,000 times over. Don't you know what kind of person Prince Uzun is? This was the heir to the Uzun Empire, the true crown prince. Our Chamberlain of Dependencies did everything we could to protect him, but he was actually killed by you. Do you know how big of a disaster this is? The decades of peace between the Empire and Uzun will be destroyed by you. Your Wang clan should go apologize to the Holy Emperor. Guards, take this kid down for me. As the official from the Chamberlain of Dependencies spoke, he suddenly pointed his finger at Wang Chong. Who dares? The eagle roared and stomped down, standing in front of Wang Chong. His arms were wide open, and his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets as he firmly shielded Wang Chong behind him. The authority granted by His Majesty, the decree of Emperor Gaozu and Emperor Taizong, allows the Chamberlain of Dependencies to act as it pleases. You didn't think you could just walk away after causing such a disaster, did you? The official from the Chamberlain of Dependencies waved his hand. Bush. Countless imperial army soldiers and experts of the Chamberlain of Dependencies immediately swarmed in, surrounding Wang Chong and Old Eagle. The Yusang First Prince followed protocol and joined the diplomatic mission, handing over his credentials. Everything had been done in an orderly fashion. Everything had been done in accordance with the rules, but he had died in a small practice field not far from the imperial city, right before the eyes of the Chamberlain of Dependencies. This was no small crime. Not even the Chamberlain of Dependencies could bear such a crime. And compared to the destruction that the death of the first prince of Uzun would cause in the future, this matter paled in comparison. If the Chamberlain of Dependencies wanted to smoothly escape responsibility, they could not allow the main culprit, Wang Chong, to escape. If anyone dares to act against young master, don't blame me, the eagle, for being impolite. The eagle's arms were wide open, and his eyes were red with anxiety. The surrounding guards from the Wang clan and the Zhang clan also drew their swords. Forget it, this is all I can do. Huang Qian'er sighed. Her right hand gripped the silver sword on her back and she stood in front of Wang Chong, but she did not draw her sword. This battle was unavoidable. The death of the first prince of Uzun would cause the entire capital to be in turmoil. It was certain to cause an earth-shattering uproar, and all the great clans, including the Huang clan, would be drawn into it. No matter what would happen in the future, at the very least, she had done her part by protecting him today. Bastards! Do you want to rebel? Men, take him down for me today no matter what. The official from the Chamberlain of Dependencies suddenly pointed at Wang Chong, also enraged. Clang, clang, clang. In an instant, swords and sabers were unsheathed, gleaming with cold light. The two sides faced each other, and the atmosphere was tense. Ha! Sheathe your weapons. Just when the atmosphere was at its most tense, Wang Chong suddenly sneered and pushed aside the eagle's hands. Young master. The eagle turned his head anxiously. The Chamberlain of Dependencies was no laughing matter. If he was taken away by them, even if he didn't die, he would at least lose a layer of skin. Not to mention, the Chamberlain of Dependencies was clearly trying to push Wang Chong to his death, using him as a scapegoat. Don't worry, the eagle, things haven't reached that point yet. Wang Chong grinned and waved his hand, placating the eagle, his expression relaxed. Under the astonished gazes of the two sides, Wang Chong suddenly walked out of the encirclement and stood in front of the official and the experts of the Chamberlain of Dependencies. What is your name? Wang Chong walked over and asked. Jing Chenzhou, how is it? Zheng Chenzhou coldly said, thinking that Wang Chong wanted to remember his name so that he could take revenge in the future. But how could the Chamberlain of Dependencies be afraid of the Wang clan's threat? Ha! Wang Chong suddenly laughed. Under the dazed gazes of the experts of the Chamberlain of Dependencies, he suddenly stretched out a palm and lightly patted Zheng Chenzhou's face. The Chamberlain of Dependencies is just this group of experts. No wonder you were blinded by a single leaf and rode all over your neck. What do you mean? Zheng Chenzhou fiercely dodged Wang Chong's palm and raised his head, glaring fiercely at him. Ha! The Chamberlain of Dependencies is in charge of receiving all foreign nations, but you can't even tell the real and fake princes apart? Rumble. When Wang Chong said these words, let alone the people of the Chamberlain of Dependencies, even the eagle and Huang Qianer were stunned. What do you mean? After receiving a fake prince for more than 3 months, you still can't tell? Fools. Do you think that if that really was the Uzun first prince, those Uzun cavalry would leave so easily? Didn't any of you notice that their reaction was too calm after the death of the first prince? You've received them for more than 3 months in vain, yet you can't even recognize a fake prince. And you even let them kill so many people on the practice field. Buzz. A single stone raised 1,000 ripples. Before Huang Qianer and Zheng Chenzhou could say anything, the surrounding people were thrown into an uproar by Wang Chong's words. Fake prince? How is that possible? Does this mean that we've all been deceived by the Chamberlain of Dependencies? A fake prince actually killed so many of our people? Damn it, it can't be, right? Why can't it be? If it wasn't fake, how could young Master Wang have dared to kill the first prince so decisively? So you're saying that we've all been deceived? Bastard! This is infuriating. At this moment, the crowd was in an uproar. Everyone's eyes were filled with rage and irritation. The first prince, on the practice field, was actually not very strong. But because of his identity as the Uzun first prince, and because he always used his body as a shield to block swords, everyone was afraid to take action, and he had used tricks to kill so many people. If they had known his true identity, they would have long since cut him into pieces. In an instant, everyone was filled with rage at being deceived. The eagle and Huang Qianer looked at each other. Zheng Chenzhou took in a deep breath and stared in a daze at Wang Chong, suddenly speechless. He had originally intended to capture Wang Chong so that he could explain himself to his superiors. But now, capturing him was no longer important. If what Wang Chong said was true, then the Chamberlain of Dependencies had truly failed in its duty. How did you know? Zheng Chenzhou sternly said. Although he did not nod, even he believed it. Killing the first prince of the Uzun first prince was no trifling matter that involved 2 countries. Wang Chong's actions had been far too straightforward, so straightforward that he had not hesitated in the slightest. If he had known about the background of the Uzun first prince, if he had known that the one on the practice field was a fake, then his actions could be completely explained. Moreover, with the death of the first prince, Dusong Mengpoj and the others had left too quickly. Although there was nothing wrong with wanting to protect oneself, one had to consider the situation. If the Tang dynasty had encountered such a problem, it would have never so easily left. Not even the main culprit, Wang Chong, had been eliminated. This has never been a very difficult matter. It's just that all of you have underestimated the Uzun. How could the mighty first prince of the Uzun first prince, the future successor, so easily put himself in danger and even use his body to block a sword? Even if he agreed, would great General Dusong Mengpoj allow it if he was there? None of you suspected anything about such an obvious matter. A simple game of leopard and crown prince left all of you running in circles. If I hadn't appeared, how many more people were you prepared to let him kill? Truly foolish beyond belief. Could the lives of the Uzun be more precious than those of the Tang dynasty? There's no need for all of you to worry about the matter of first prince of the Uzun first prince. Our Wang clan will take responsibility for this matter. If you have the time, you should think about how to explain to His Majesty those 30-some scions and young elites who died in vain. With these words, Wang Chong pushed Zheng Qinzhou aside and began to leave. Zheng Qinzhou stood there in a daze, not even trying to stop him. Wang Chong's words had completely surpassed his imagination. Zheng Qinzhou's mind was blank. He could not accept that he had been abandoned by a group of Uzun people. How could this be? Chapter 417. As Wang Chong was leaving the practice ground, deep within the palace, 5th Prince Li Heng was pacing back and forth with his head lowered, his heart brimming with apprehension. In front of him was a threshold not even a foot high. But this threshold was like an invisible wall, firm and boundless, exuding a suffocating pressure as it stood in front of Li Heng. All was quiet, but Li Heng's forehead was covered in cold sweat and his heart was filled with indescribable anxiety. More than 2 hours had passed since the audience, but even now, Li Heng still had not received the summons. Li Heng was well aware that his fate would be decided by this tiny threshold. Buzz! Suddenly, the gate opened and a sharp voice came from deep within the hall. Summon 5th Prince Li Heng for an audience. Buzz! It was like a heavy hammer had struck his heart, causing Li Heng's entire body to tremble as he came to his senses. The summons he had waited so long for had finally arrived. Li Heng took in a deep breath, calmed himself, and tidied up his clothes. Only then did he raise his foot and nervously step over the threshold. Thump! The sound of his foot landing on the ground made Li Heng feel like he was stepping on a mountain. The hall was deep and serene, seemingly without end. Beneath his foot was a cold and icy sensation. Other than the solemn and cold guards of imperial insignia, each 50 zhang tall, there was no one else in the passage. The passage was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. After what seemed like only a moment, but also like countless eons, when Li Heng felt like he would never reach the end, his vision suddenly opened up and a bright light came from up ahead. At the same time, a boundless, noble, divine, and immeasurably vast qi emerged. In front of this qi, the pressure on Li Heng's body suddenly became thousands of times heavier. Your son pays respects to Imperial Father. Li Heng stepped over the threshold, not daring to raise his head as he respectfully and fearfully kneeled on the ground. Even though he was already 20, Li Heng still felt the same reverence for that godlike figure in the hall, even more so than when he was a child. Hua Guang shook his head. The figure above the hall remained motionless. Below that figure, Li Heng sensed many weak but equally powerful auras. They were the princes in the depths of the palace. It was obvious that he was not the only one who appeared here today. The hall was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Cold and callous gazes came from all around, landing on the kneeling Li Heng near the gate. There was no kinship in the royal family. It didn't matter if it was a wise ruler or an incompetent ruler. Dynasty after dynasty, generation after generation, this was an iron law that no one could change. In the palace, Li Heng felt no warmth, only a deep chill. Get up! After an unknown period of time, A dignified and vast voice finally resounded from above the hall. Li Heng trembled in fear as he stood up, but he still did not dare to raise his head. Following his usual custom, he lowered his head and walked to the very end of the hall. Although he was the esteemed fifth prince, Li Heng had the least background and was the weakest of the princes. Thus, in terms of seniority, he would always stand at the very end. The princes had never cared about his status as the fifth prince, and the Holy Emperor had never cared about such things. Contrary to what Li Heng had imagined, the Holy Emperor did not immediately question him after he entered the ranks, as if he had forgotten about him. The other princes also retracted their gazes. The air seemed to have suddenly returned to normal, and everything returned to normal. Li Heng was like a ball of air, standing at the very end of the line, no one paying any attention to him. An enormous chi, as heavy as a mountain, towered closest to his father. Although it was as bright as the sun, it was inconceivably powerful to the other princes. Li Heng knew that this was the first prince's chi. In terms of seniority, no matter which method was used, the first prince, as the future heir apparent, would always stand at his father's feet, the person closest to him. This was a fact that no one could change. Every time he was summoned, his father would ask him about the politics of the court, the maintenance of armaments, the cultivation of martial arts, the livelihood of the common people, and so on. Every time they met, it was a test. It was not just him. The other princes were the same. While each of them was being tested by their father, they were also displaying their talents. The imperial household lacked the warmth of ordinary fathers and sons. This was also why Li Heng had avoided the imperial palace. The politics of the court, foreign affairs, irrigation works. Li Heng did not understand any of the things the princes discussed. It was not that he was too shallow, but that he had never had these resources, not even a teacher to teach him these things. Li Heng did not dare to hate, nor did he dare to complain. Just like before, he stood there with his head lowered, trembling in fear and motionless. The first prince, the second prince, the third prince, the fourth prince, and then the sixth prince, the seventh prince, and all the princes stepped forward to accept the Holy Emperor's test. When it was finally his turn, okay, let's end it here for today. The dignified and majestic figure at the top of the hall suddenly waved his hand. Li Heng had been mercilessly skipped. A hint of disappointment flitted through Li Heng's eyes. He was a little disappointed and a little glad, but he quickly regained his composure. He had experienced this sort of thing many times in the court. Today, we father and son have gathered together, so let's not talk too much about politics. Come, bring on the music. Feast. This order was like a sluice gate had been opened. Countless maids and eunuchs immediately rushed in through the door of the side hall, carrying plates of fruit, tables, chairs, wine pots, and incense burners with smiles on their faces. In just a few moments, the princes were surrounded by tables and chairs brimming with an ancient charm, laden with fruits, pastries, wine, and dishes. Once the princes were seated, clang, the chimes of the bells and the sounds of musical instruments could be heard. Several beautiful maids dressed in white dresses with fair skin and white bones walked in like fairies. Imperial Father. Just when the maids were preparing to enter the center of the hall and perform a palace dance, a voice interrupted the music. Imperial Father, this sort of soft palace music is a bit lacking in the iron-blooded style of our Tang dynasty. Your son has heard that fifth brother has prepared a sword dance for Imperial Father to entertain his brothers, and it was with Imperial Father's permission. Fifth brother, don't you think so? The third prince suddenly stood up from his seat and spoke to the ceiling of the hall. He then turned his head to look at Li Heng at the very back of the line, his cold eyes shining with a domineering light. Buzz! For a moment, time seemed to freeze. All the music, dancing, talking, breathing, chewing, everything vanished. The relaxed atmosphere suddenly became tense, brimming with the silent glint of swords. All the maids and eunuchs in the palace lowered their heads at the same time, apprehension in their eyes. The other princes sneered and turned to look at Li Heng at the very back. Even the first prince, who was seated at the top of the banquet table, put down his chopsticks and turned his head to look over, even though he did not have the same sarcasm as the other princes. The entire hall was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. "It's here." Li Heng sensed the suffocating pressure that followed him like a shadow, and his entire body paled. He had originally believed that he could escape this calamity. He hadn't expected his third imperial brother to still let him go. The fact that he hadn't made trouble at the start wasn't because he hadn't noticed Li Heng, but because he had left this opportunity for now. As he sensed those gazes of ridicule, sneer, malice, or hostility, Li Heng's forehead suddenly became covered in cold sweat. He had never experienced this sort of feeling before. For the first time, he was the center of attention, but it was not what he wanted. "Third brother really isn't willing to let me go," Li Heng quietly said to himself. He had never learned a sword dance, nor did he know how to do it. None of the princes had ever performed a sword dance. Li Heng knew that the third prince was doing this on purpose. "Your Highness, you must remember that in the palace, the more you speak, the more mistakes you make. The less you speak, the less mistakes you make. This is the result of this old servant's decades of experience. Your Highness, you must remember this." Li Jingzhong's words before entering the palace once more rang out in his ears. No one could predict what would happen after entering the palace, and Li Jingzhong would not be able to enter. These were his final words before Li Heng entered the palace. "Imperial father, Li Heng was just about to refuse when he heard the fifth prince's voice. "Fifth brother, what's wrong? Why are you so hesitant in front of Imperial father? Do you want to go back on your word and suddenly become unwilling?" His voice was cold and tinged with a sneer, as if he had long ago seen through Li Heng's thoughts. "Third brother, Li Heng straightened his body, but just when he was about to speak, it was like an ancient mountain was pressing down on him. Li Heng suddenly felt a majestic and awe-inspiring gaze fall upon him. "Imperial father." Li Heng's heart trembled, and he immediately swallowed the words he had been about to spit out. But before he could speak again, he heard the Holy Emperor wave his hand and speak in an indifferent and calm voice. "Enough, Bao. Don't make things difficult for your fifth brother." Buzz! A bloody aura suddenly rushed to his head. This was not the first time Li Heng had been ignored, but this time, Li Heng found it extremely difficult to endure. The words Wang Chong had said outside the Kunwa training camp suddenly appeared in his mind. "Your Highness, how can you catch a tiger cub without entering the tiger's den? You have no path of retreat. If you want to change your situation, change His Majesty's view of you. You can only take the initiative and dare to fight for it. After entering the palace, the third prince and the others will definitely do everything they can to make things difficult for you. In normal circumstances, you will definitely shrink back. So, no matter what, you must do the exact opposite. You must take the initiative to display yourself in front of His Majesty. This audience is your best chance. No matter what, you must grasp it well. Only by putting yourself on the line can you be reborn. If you want to obtain His Majesty's favor and attention, this might be your last chance." Blood continued to gush to the top of his head. Li Heng could endure the ridicule, cruelty, apathy, attacks, and assassinations of the princes, but the one thing he could not endure was the disregard of his most respected and beloved father. "Imperial father, I'm ready. Your son truly has prepared a sword dance that he wishes to offer to Imperial father." This sentence was loud and clear, and the rumbling sound reverberated throughout the entire hall. Li Heng kneeled on the ground, his body trembling, but his voice was firm. For a moment, the hall was silent. All the princes were dumbfounded. Even the Holy Emperor's gaze froze for a moment. He turned his head, his gaze once more falling on Li Heng. "Permitted." Chapter 418. Boom! The gate opened and a rider galloped in. Outside the palace gate, Li Jingzhong's heart tightened when he saw the fifth prince ride out. Tugging on the corner of his robe, he strode forward and took the reins of the fifth prince's horse. "Your Highness, how was it? Your Highness, how was it? How was it?" Li Jingzhong raised his head, his body fiercely trembling from nervousness and excitement. This matter was no small matter. One could say that the fifth prince's life depended on it. Similarly, Li Jingzhong's life depended on it as well. In the palace, it was common for a subject to die when the master was humiliated. Thus, one could easily imagine how uneasy Li Jingzhong had been in the last few hours. "Uncle Jing, don't be nervous. It's fine, it's fine." Li Heng sat on his horse, his face red with excitement, his neck red. He seemed even more excited than Li Jingzhong. Li Heng still couldn't restrain his excitement when he thought about what had just happened in the palace. His entire life of being low-key, cowering, tolerating, and cowardly had all vanished into thin air in that moment in the palace. Li Heng knew that the third prince was trying to harm him, and he also knew that if he revealed the truth that he knew martial arts, he would likely infuriate the Holy Emperor and be attacked by his imperial brothers. He would then be accused of deceiving the sovereign. But Li Heng couldn't worry about such things. After being bullied, plotted against, ignored, and ridiculed in the palace for 20 years, Li Heng's most intense desires suddenly exploded. Even if he was to be executed tomorrow, he still wanted his father to look at him in the eye with dignity. Li Heng didn't know how to perform a sword dance, but he did. There was no technique, and it was different from any other sword dance in the world. Li Heng's sword dance came from his heart, a bold and unrestrained dance of decades of venting his emotions. When the sword dance ended, it was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Li Heng was prepared to await the worst judgment, but then he heard the world's most beautiful voice. After 10-some years, he finally heard the voice of his father from his childhood, a voice filled with affirmation. Li Heng could still remember the surprised and marvelous expressions on the faces of his imperial brothers when they heard those words. "Uncle Jing, Wang Chong was right. He was right. Let's go and find Wang Chong." Li Heng was extremely excited. If it wasn't for Wang Chong's encouragement and his analysis, even if he wanted to perform at that time, he wouldn't have had the courage to do so. As it turned out, everything was as Wang Chong had predicted. If he showed even the slightest bit of hesitation or denial during today's audience, then he would really be unable to escape today's calamity. Wang Chong was right. Only by taking the initiative and fighting for it with all their might would they have any hope of survival. Just as Wang Chong had analyzed, His Majesty was an aggressive army. His life had been forged through all kinds of adversities. As long as she took the initiative and performed well, she would be able to gain her father's favor. The moment his imperial father spoke, Li Heng raised his head. His eyes could clearly see the look in Li Heng's eyes. He had never felt his father's feelings as he did now. Like a bird in a cage, the moment his sword began to dance, Li Heng had broken the shackles in his heart, broken all the apprehensions in his body and heart. Li Jingzhong did not say anything. He stared blankly at the excited fifth prince, who was waving his hands and feet in joy. He was completely stunned. He had never seen Li Heng like this before. He was dancing around, confident, passionate, and brimming with initiative and enthusiasm. In all his years of serving Li Heng, Li Jingzhong had never seen him like this. Li Jingzhong had a faint feeling that the fifth prince standing before him seemed to be a little different from the fifth prince he had remembered in the past. But not even he could tell what was different. "Let's go!" Li Jingzhong came back to his senses and led Li Heng's horse out. "Bastard!" Upon returning to the palace, the third prince furiously slammed his palm down, crushing the 3-inch thick table of black gold into a ball of paper. When he thought about what had happened in the palace, the third prince's face turned ashen and nasty. He had put in a lot of effort and had calculated everything. The only thing he hadn't expected was for the fifth prince to change from his usual routine and offer a dance. And even more surprising was that not only had his father not punished him for such a major matter, he had even bestowed upon him a special robe of the imperial clan. A robe bestowed by the emperor was no trifling matter. Even the slowest person would understand what his father meant. Starting from now, no one was allowed to do anything to Li Heng. The robe bestowed by the emperor was a protective talisman. Anyone who dared to do anything to Li Heng would be seeking their own death. Because doing so was tantamount to challenging the holy emperor. Investigate for me just what's going on with fifth brother? Not even imperial father can cure his illness. How in the world did he manage to cultivate all of a sudden? Furthermore, he has already reached origin energy tier 9. The third prince turned his head, his heart seething with rage. "Your Highness, it's useless." In the hall, the black-robed elder with triangular eyes, ghost hands, who had once appeared near the Spirit Vein Mountain, sternly said, "The first prince has already investigated, but he didn't find any clues at all. The fifth prince has been very low-key in the training camp. Moreover, the fifth prince's illness, not even His Majesty can do anything about it. This isn't something a normal person can do. There's definitely something we don't know about." The third prince said nothing, a hint of apprehension in his eyes. This was one of the reasons he hadn't sent anyone to assassinate Li Heng. If Li Heng really did have some formidable expert protecting him, someone who could change Li Heng's fate and completely alter his constitution, then this was not someone the third prince could deal with. If things went wrong, this person might even leave behind some clues that would be disadvantageous to him. He had taken such a big detour to plot against Li Heng in front of his imperial father precisely because of this apprehension, even though he had still failed in the end. Damn it. The third prince clenched his teeth and clenched his fists. No matter who he is, I have to find him. I'd like to see just who is helping him. Ghost hands, take your men and leave. Old Fifth has just been rewarded by Imperial Father and is at the height of his success. Once he leaves the Imperial Palace, he will definitely go find that person. Take your men and carefully reward them. Bastard thing. Even if he's an immortal from the heavens, if he dares to interfere in the struggle for Crown Prince, I will have him fall to the ground. Yes, your subordinate will immediately take his men. Ghost Hands lowered his head, gathered his men, and left with them. Meanwhile, in the palaces of the other princes, the second prince, the fourth prince, the sixth prince, the seventh prince, all the princes were also paying attention to this matter. Old Wu, who had always been a coward and appeared to be a coward, suddenly became so proactive and showed off his abilities, which surprised everyone. Even more shocking was the Holy Emperor's attitude. The matter of Old Fifth had actually been so lightly brushed aside. Not only had the Holy Emperor not rebuked him, he had even gifted him a robe. He hadn't even asked about the cause of the matter. This Old Fifth, I truly underestimated him. I didn't think that he would hide himself so deeply. If he had been obedient and didn't have any improper thoughts, it wouldn't have mattered. But since he has such ambitions, he can't be tolerated. There's only one imperial throne. Since he wants to sit on it, there's no need to talk about brotherly affection. While he's still weak, we have to find a way to get rid of him no matter what. Otherwise, if he's allowed to sit on the throne, what will happen? There are already enough brothers in the palace fighting over the throne. There can't be any more. Not even Li Heng could have imagined that his sword dance had simultaneously aroused the hostility and killing intent of the other princes. If their hostility toward Li Heng had been limited to thoughts before, now, after this banquet, these thoughts could be transformed into action. There was no familial affection in the imperial household. If this was the case between father and son, then what about brothers? Not even a saint could resolve a problem, so how could a robe solve it? It was just that everything had to be done in even greater secrecy. Flap flap. As the darkness deepened, a black crow flapped its wings and flew through the sky, ultimately landing in a corner in the northwest corner. It's here. The eagle raised a hand and caught the crow. It seems that the fifth prince's side is safe. Wang Chong held his hands behind him as he gazed at the crow in the eagle's hand and breathed a sigh of relief. Right now, he was most worried about the fifth prince. He had been waiting here this entire time for news of the fifth prince. Young master is correct. Li Jingzhong's message says that the fifth prince has managed to escape unscathed, and he even obtained an official robe bestowed upon him by the Holy Emperor. The fifth prince says that he wishes to see you, but Li Jingzhong says that he has already stopped you from seeing him. The eagle finished reading the letter on the crow's leg and nodded. This fellow is rather useful. Wang Chong nodded. As he listened to the eagle read the contents of the letter, a strange look flashed across his eyes. Li Jingzhong, the future treacherous official, reacted quickly in this aspect. He knew that this was not the time for them to meet, so he had taken the initiative to stop the fifth prince. It was worth sparing his life back then. I hope that he can continue to be like this. Wang Chong thought to himself. Li Jingzhong was gradually displaying his true potential. As the future treacherous official, he had almost complete control over the entire imperial court. Li Jingzhong's perception of politics and his ability to sense danger were unquestionable. With him by the fifth prince's side, the fifth prince would be much safer, and he would also be a great help. At least, that was the case for now. Let's go, we should set off. We still have a very important mission ahead of us. This is just the beginning. Wang Chong raised his head, his gaze piercing through the buildings toward the imperial palace. Only he understood that although Li Heng had successfully escaped this calamity, it was not the end. It was merely the beginning of an even more magnificent and dangerous chess game. Once one entered this chess game, one could not withdraw. Until the very end, it could not be considered resolved. Big Uncle, himself, the entire Wang clan, the King of Song, King Qi, the first prince, the second prince, all the princes and princesses, no matter who they were, could not withdraw until the very end. Chapter 419. In the depths of the imperial palace, Wang Chong finally saw the first beauty of the Tang dynasty for the first time. But as soon as he saw consort Tai Zhen, Wang Chong's heart sank. He suddenly knew that no matter what plan he had before, he had to reconsider it from this moment on. Because the first beauty of the Tang dynasty was completely different from what he had known before. The dark-colored palace curtains swayed, and a jade-like foot with smooth skin and jade-like bones stretched out from behind the curtains, lightly landing on the white jade steps. That delicate jade-like toe was even more sparkling and translucent than the white jade beneath it. As the slender foot stretched out, a peerless beauty with smooth skin and fair bones slowly walked out from the inside with her head held high. "Wang Chong, you're finally willing to see me?" A voice echoed in the palace, accompanied by a pair of sharp eyes with a faint smile, looking down at Wang Chong. With this gaze, Wang Chong immediately felt an invisible pressure on his shoulders. Wang Chong had never seen consort Tai Zhen before, but no matter how ignorant he was, Wang Chong knew that although consort Tai Zhen had stirred up violent waves in the imperial court, she herself was just an ordinary woman. Although the Yang family was also a local high-ranking official, they were far inferior to the Wang family, a family of generals and ministers. As for consort Tai Zhen, she was just an ordinary person who didn't know any martial arts. But now, consort Tai Zhen not only revealed a sharp and superior aura that only the concubines in the imperial palace could have, but also a strong and powerful aura that far surpassed his own. The 9th level of the martial realm. No, she has definitely reached the 1st or 2nd level of the profound martial realm. Her strength has improved so much in just a few months. Wang Chong felt a chill in his heart. Consort Tai Zhen incident. Wang Chong had learned a lot about consort Tai Zhen from the King of Song. Consort Tai Zhen doesn't know martial arts. Wang Chong was certain of this. However, in just over half a year, not only had consort Tai Zhen changed, but even Yang Zhao had changed. However, consort Tai Zhen's changes were much greater than Yang Zhao's. "Ah, little sister, this is my good brother, and also your good brother. Don't make things difficult for him." A hearty voice came from the side. There were no outsiders here. Yang Zhao hurriedly stood up and spoke up for his sworn brother. A scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at in a new light. The current Yang Zhao was completely different from when Wang Chong had first met him. He wore a white robe and a black silk hat, and his right hand was stroking his beard. His entire body naturally exuded the aura of a scholarly official that would win the admiration of others. Stellar energy rumbled through his body, and he exuded the enormous aura of a true martial tier 5 or 6. This ruffian who had once wandered the streets of the capital without the strength to truss a chicken had undergone such an astonishing transformation after entering the palace and officialdom. It was as if he had been reborn. Wang Chong had diligently practiced for almost a year, but compared to the transformations that Yang Zhao and consort Tai Zhen had undergone in the last few months, he truly couldn't keep up. Forbidden bestowment art. A thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind as he subconsciously thought of this forbidden art. Wang Chong was no stranger to this forbidden art. Back then, his master, the evil emperor, had intended to use this method to transfer all of his energy to Wang Chong. This method could make one an expert in a short period of time, but his master, the evil emperor, would also be doomed. This was a huge price, so Wang Chong had refused on the spot. No matter what kind of bestowment art it was, the price to make one an expert in a short period of time was not small. Thus, this method had never been widely used. But the imperial household was clearly different. I heard back then that there was a group of secret guardians in the palace. These people began cultivating from a young age, and the meaning of their existence was to accumulate energy so that they could use the bestowment art on the princes and princesses. I didn't pay much attention back then, but it seems that the rumors were true. Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil, but he quickly regained his composure. Your Highness, you're right. Wang Chong should have come long ago. It's just that I've just joined the Kunwa training camp and couldn't leave. Please forgive me, Your Highness. Wang Chong immediately lowered his head and said respectfully, You sure are honest. Consort Taijin sneered coldly, but her expression eventually eased up. Even though she was a little angry at this lad for rejecting her time and time again, she couldn't stand in the way of her cousin. Moreover, it was true that Wang Chong had joined the Kunwa training camp. However, it was impossible for her to let go of the matter so easily. Speak, what is it? The mobilization of the Ministry of War has just passed, so you wouldn't have come here if there wasn't anything special. Speak, what is it? As he spoke, he spread open his hands, and two mysterious white-clothed beauties with powerful auras, even stronger than the old nanny at Princess Anai Huang's side, walked out barefooted from within the curtain. These two middle-aged beauties had hairpins in their hair, and they had cold expressions on their faces. They each held Consort Taijin's hands and supported her to sit on the throne in Yuzhen Palace. On their foreheads was a tear-shaped flame totem, and it was extremely eye-catching. A hint of astonishment flashed across Wang Chong's eyes, but he didn't say anything. It's about the fifth prince, Wang Chong said. But as soon as he said those words, the atmosphere in Yuzhen Palace suddenly changed. Consort Taijin's face darkened, and even Yang Zhao's expression darkened. Even though he was the one who had recommended Wang Chong, he hadn't known what Wang Chong was going to say. Wang Chong, do you know what you're saying? You're crazy. Men, send the guest out. Consort Taijin's face was as cold as ice. She shot a glance at Yang Zhao, stood up, and immediately ordered the guest out. Even though she hadn't been in the palace for long, she wasn't blind. The matter regarding the fifth prince had only happened in the afternoon, but there was no one in the palace who didn't know about it. She was favored in the palace, and with the favor of the Holy Emperor and her concubine status, no one in the palace dared to provoke her. But Consort Taijin also knew that there were some things that she couldn't afford to provoke in a place like this. The War of the Princes just so happened to be one of those taboos. Wang Chong, you've really gone too far this time. The War of the Princes isn't something we can interfere with. Do you know what you're asking of her ladyship? The fifth prince is now the enemy of everyone. Who knows how many people want to kill him? Whoever dares to help him will become the enemy of all the princes and princesses in the palace, as well as all the concubines in the palace. Damn it, if I knew you were here for this kind of thing, I definitely wouldn't have brought you here. Yang Zhao's expression was very unsightly. There was no need for Consort Taijin to give him that attitude. If he had known this, he would have stopped Wang Chong first. Don't easily get involved in the disputes between the princes. This was common sense. Even if one didn't have the accumulation of great clans, without the experience and lessons of the clan, this was a principle that even an ordinary person understood. The danger of the War of the Princes was too great. They still didn't have a stable footing in the palace. Even if they were favored, this was still a taboo that couldn't be lightly touched. They couldn't agree to Wang Chong's request. This had already exceeded the scope of an ordinary request. Her ladyship. Although the temperature in the room plummeted and the atmosphere was no longer suitable for further discussion, Wang Chong didn't leave. He knew that this matter wouldn't be easy, but no matter what, Wang Chong had to try. Her ladyship, if an elephant entered the forest, what would happen? What do you mean? Consort Taijin sneered. Had Wang Chong gone crazy? What forest? What elephant? She didn't think that these words meant anything. No matter what, she would never easily help the fifth prince and put herself in danger. However, Wang Chong was as calm as ever. There was no change in his expression. But if the forest turns into a room like this, but the animals in the forest don't change? If the elephant doesn't change, what will happen to your ladyship in the future? Wang Chong continued. Wang Chong, what are you trying to say? This time, Consort Taizhen's eyelids finally twitched. She stared at Wang Chong, vaguely sensing something. Your ladyship, the forest has turned into a room, but the animals haven't changed. The elephant hasn't changed. Does your ladyship think that the animals huddled together will wait to be trampled to death by the elephant, or will they attack as a group? Impudent! Are you trying to say that I'm an elephant? This time, before Wang Chong could finish speaking, Consort Taizhen interrupted him. This comparison was too rude. Your ladyship, please forgive me. Wang Chong didn't have that intention. But doesn't your ladyship feel that your situation is very similar to the fifth prince's? As Wang Chong spoke, he raised his head and gazed at Consort Taizhen, who was seated on the throne. Wang Chong, shut your mouth. Your ladyship is of noble birth and is doted on by the holy emperor. How could you be the same as the fifth prince? Don't speak nonsense. Seeing that Wang Chong was about to become ridiculous if he continued speaking, Yang Zhao hurriedly spoke up to stop him. Cousin, sit down and let him speak. I'd like to see just what he can say. Just how similar am I to the fifth prince? Consort Taizhen sneered. Wang Chong's thoughts couldn't be hidden from her. However, if he thought that a few casual words would change her mind and make her participate in the War of the Princes, then his thinking was too simple. Even if the one who came today was that old master of the Wang clan, she still wouldn't change her mind. Your Highness, the elephant is too big. Even if it doesn't do anything, it can't do anything. Even if it doesn't do anything, the animals in the room will also feel threatened. Doesn't your ladyship feel that your current situation is the same? Even if you don't do anything, you're still a threat to the other concubines, consorts, and even the princes. If your ladyship doesn't participate in the War of the Princes, will you really be safe? Chapter 420. Wang Chong was the first person who dared to say such words. Consort Taizhen's situation was actually very bad. Whether it was the Consort Taizhen incident or the Holy Emperor's favor, Consort Taizhen appeared to be boundlessly glorious on the surface, but in reality, whether it was in the court or the palace, Consort Taizhen was facing heavy pressure. In the court, there were still many officials who criticized her. Many people didn't object on the surface, but they were secretly very dissatisfied. Therefore, Consort Taizhen always tried to stay out of the court's affairs as much as possible to avoid the dissatisfaction of those officials. And in the palace, Consort Taizhen suddenly rose to the throne, almost single-handedly snatching away all of the Holy Emperor's favor. Because of this, the Holy Emperor even wanted to go against all the officials. For many concubines and concubines, this was something they couldn't bear. If not for their misgivings about the Holy Emperor, who knew how many concubines and concubines in the 3 palaces and 6 courtyards would have long attacked her. Consort Taizhen was well aware of this, so in the vast palace, besides the vicinity of Consort Yuzhen, the Imperial Garden, and a few places she usually went, she always avoided the other concubines and concubines as much as possible. There was no relationship between them, much less any contact. The rejection and hostility in the palace was invisible, and Consort Taizhen could clearly feel the hostility from the various palaces and courtyards. This was also a taboo for her. No one had ever dared to speak like this in front of her, not even Yang Zhao. But Wang Chong had actually directly exposed her in such a bloody manner. Wang Chong, you're too impudent. Having been stabbed where it hurt by Wang Chong, Consort Taizhen's expression suddenly turned cold, like frost. Even Yang Zhao's expression changed, and he strenuously signaled to Wang Chong with his eyes. This bastard, is he crazy today? Even he didn't dare to say such words, because Consort Taizhen wasn't just his cousin anymore, she was also a concubine in the palace. Wang Chong was a little too bold. Looks like I've been thinking too much. Although I've come for the 5th prince, I've also been thinking for the Empress. Since your Highness feels that this one is speaking nonsense, then this one, Wang Chong, will not say any more. I have disturbed your Highness. Wang Chong will take his leave. Unexpectedly, when he saw Consort Taizhen was enraged, Wang Chong smiled with a calm expression. As he spoke, he cupped his hands and was about to leave. Buzz! Just as Wang Chong was about to leave, a voice suddenly came from above the hall, stopping Wang Chong. Wait, stop right there. At the top of the hall, Consort Taizhen's gaze shifted. Although her expression was still as cold as ice, it was completely different from before. Wang Chong, since you say that you're thinking for this concubine, I'll give you a chance. Tell me, just how are you thinking for this concubine? If you can't give me a reasonable explanation, then don't blame this concubine for being impolite. These words were far beyond everyone's expectations. Yang Zhao shook his head and turned to look at Consort Taizhen, a hint of astonishment in his eyes. Only Wang Chong, with his back to Consort Taizhen, smiled. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes. Although Consort Taizhen was no longer the same as before, and her status was lofty, and after becoming a concubine, she had even more authority. But in the end, she was still a woman. She might not be interested in the fifth prince's matters, but she would definitely be interested in his matters. Your Highness. Wang Chong turned to face Consort Taizhen, quickly concealing the emotions in his eyes. Your Highness, don't you feel that your current situation is very similar to the fifth prince's? The fifth prince suddenly recovered his martial arts, and your Highness ascended to the position of a concubine. Both of you rose from humble beginnings, and both of you made others feel threatened, and both of you were ostracized by others. Wang Chong looked at the greatest beauty of the Tang dynasty and spoke calmly. Is this what you mean by thinking for this concubine? What you're saying is too far-fetched. I can't see any reason for me to take the risk and help the fifth prince. Consort Taizhen said bluntly. Her attitude toward the War of the Princes had not changed. She would avoid it if she could and stay away from it if she could. Wang Chong's words were not enough to make the fifth prince sacrifice so much. Moreover, she had no friendship with the fifth prince. Of course it's not worth it now. But in 100 years, when the new emperor ascends to the throne, what will your Highness do then? Boom! Like a bolt of lightning striking down from the heavens, Wang Chong's simple words caused the expressions of Consort Taizhen and Yang Zhao to change at the same time. From the beginning until now, this was what Wang Chong had said, and it was the words that had the greatest impact on the two of them. Wang Chong, how dare you? Consort Taizhen and Yang Zhao yelled at almost the same time. Even the two indifferent and mysterious beautiful women in white who had always been indifferent to Wang Chong by Consort Taizhen's sides could not help but look at the youth opposite them. 100 years for His Majesty. This kind of thing could not even be thought of normally, much less talked about. In front of these four people, Wang Chong's words were simply outrageous. Bastard! Are you cursing His Majesty? Consort Taizhen's eyes flashed coldly, and an enormous aura exploded from her body, striking fear into the hearts of others. Wang Chong did not mean that. But there is no ruler for 100 years, and there is no emperor for 1,000 years. This has always been the case since ancient times. Taizu and Taizong are no exceptions. No matter what, the new emperor will ascend to the throne in the future. Does your Highness think that you will still be able to maintain your current position? Right now, with the Holy Emperor present, no one in the 6 palaces will act rashly. But when the new emperor ascends to the throne, what does your Highness think will happen to the concubines of the 6 palaces? Wang Chong did not mean to be disrespectful. Please reconsider, your Highness. Wang Chong said sincerely. His words made Consort Taizhen uneasy, and so did Yang Zhao. No matter how outrageous Wang Chong's words were, there was one thing he was right about. His Majesty was no longer young, and the eldest prince was already in his 30s. Discussing the succession of the crown prince was an urgent matter, and it had long been on the agenda. This was also a problem they had no choice but to face. When the Holy Emperor was present, no one dared to be impudent. But when the new emperor ascended to the throne, everything would be different. Yang Zhao might not be able to maintain her current wealth. Just like the Holy Emperor, he might not be able to protect her. And Consort Taizhen had another worry in her heart. Since ancient times, it was tradition to choose the eldest, not the youngest. Even if she was pregnant now, the ministers would definitely not allow her child to sit on the throne of the crown prince. This was also something that Consort Taizhen had always been afraid of, and at the same time did not dare to think about. The two of them had to admit that Wang Chong's words had stabbed at the weakest and most painful part of their hearts. Wang Chong, do you know that if I wanted to, I could throw you into the celestial prison right now? Consort Taizhen slowly raised her head and looked at Wang Chong said. This was the first time she had seen Wang Chong, but it was precisely this first time that Wang Chong had already angered her many times. And many of the things he had said were things that she was extremely afraid of, things that she would normally never allow anyone to mention in front of her. Hi, Your Highness. There are some things that wouldn't have happened if Wang Chong didn't say them? Wang Chong said. Consort Taizhen's expression was a little dazed. Once again, Wang Chong's words were impeccable. She wanted to get angry, but she couldn't bring herself to do so. Because Consort Taizhen knew that even though Wang Chong appeared to be outrageous, everything he had said was the truth, the things that she was worried would happen. Chapter 421. Yang Zhao was also a little absent-minded. He was also brimming with the desire for power, or else he wouldn't have entered the capital. He didn't mind getting involved in the War of the Princes, but Consort Taizhen didn't like others mentioning the matters of the imperial palace in front of him, so Yang Zhao had never brought them up. As time passed, he began to feel that it was nothing. Recently, he'd been riding the crest of success, and he'd been commanding the world, causing him to completely forget about those things. But Wang Chong's words suddenly reminded him. Just as Wang Chong had said, there were some matters that even if one didn't pay attention to them and didn't get involved, they would eventually appear in front of one. It would have been fine if it was just a normal matter, but if the War of the Princes involved Consort Taizhen, then it would affect his future. Little sister, although I also feel that the War of the Princes is no small matter and that we shouldn't get involved lightly, my sworn brother's words aren't without reason. But my sworn brother's words aren't without reason. It's impossible to completely stay out of it. Perhaps we should seriously consider this matter and discuss it before deciding what to do? Yang Zhao suddenly turned around and said. Let alone Consort Taizhen, even Wang Chong was surprised by these words. After all, if Yang Zhao were to speak, the effect would be much greater. After all, they were cousins, and their relationship was much closer than his own. His words, which he had originally intended to use to convince Consort Taizhen, had moved Yang Zhao, an unexpected gain. As expected, upon hearing Yang Zhao's words, Consort Taizhen finally showed some interest. In the capital, the person she relied on the most was this cousin of hers. Big brother, the matters of the imperial palace are difficult to explain, and it's not something you can understand. Consort Taizhen had a scoundrel look on her face, her attitude much softer than before. In addition, the harem is not allowed to interfere in politics. This is a convention. His Majesty also doesn't like women in the harem to interfere too much. If I interfere too much, I'm afraid that His Majesty will be unhappy. Furthermore, I really can't see how my situation will benefit if I help the fifth prince. The first few sentences were directed at Yang Zhao, but the last few sentences were directed at Wang Chong. Haha. When Wang Chong heard this, he laughed. Your Highness, isn't it obvious? Among all the princes in the imperial harem, only the fifth prince was like the concubine. They were both innocent people without the slightest background. In the palace, no one helped him. He doesn't have any concubines or concubines behind him. Among all the princes in the imperial harem, only the fifth prince is someone that Your Highness can truly win over. As long as Your Highness treats the fifth prince well, the fifth prince, who has no background, will definitely rely on Your Highness and will never have any intention of betraying you. Furthermore, Your Highness is currently alone in the palace. If you have the fifth prince's help, you will be able to pose a threat to the other princes and Your Highness, making them even more reluctant to act rashly. More importantly, in the future, if the fifth prince ascends to the throne, he will definitely be deeply grateful to your highness. Even if your highness's status in the future can't be compared to that of the first lady, I'm afraid that it won't be much worse. Of course, if your highness has other plans, such as preparing to conceive a dragon and give birth to a true dragon to ascend to the purple pole realm in the future, that will be a different matter. Just pretend that Wang Chong didn't say anything. As he spoke, Wang Chong lowered his head. Consort Taizhen was listening attentively at the beginning, but when she heard the latter part of Wang Chong's words, she couldn't help but burst into laughter at Wang Chong's words. Little thing, what nonsense are you talking about? Even if I conceive His Majesty's dragon, it will be at least 18 years before he grows up. By that time, the War of the Princes will have long been settled. What other plans would there be? Consort Taizhen's smile suddenly lost its previous sharpness. That charming smile was like 10,000 flowers blooming at once, bright and moving. Even Wang Chong was slightly dazed. And the atmosphere in the Great Hall also became much warmer with Consort Taizhen's smile. Although Consort Taizhen's smile was hearty, Wang Chong could still sense a trace of regret in it. If she wanted to take root in this palace filled with open strife and veiled strife, the best way was to conceive a dragon's son. But Consort Taizhen had only just entered the dragon stage, while the other princes of the Holy Emperor had long since come of age. Even if she had any ideas, it was already too late. This was something that couldn't be changed no matter what. To Consort Taizhen, it was a pity. Wang Chong naturally understood this, so he wisely didn't continue the topic. Wang Chong, can you tell me why you think so highly of the fifth prince? After Consort Taizhen stopped laughing, she returned to normal. She looked at Wang Chong from the side with a meaningful gaze. Your first uncle supports the first prince. This is something that everyone knows. You clearly know this, but you still want me to support the fifth prince. What is your Wang clan doing? Or rather, are you trying to go against your uncle? Furthermore, there are rumors that the fifth prince met a mysterious expert recently, who helped him cleanse his body and gave him the ability to cultivate martial arts again, allowing him to do the impossible. If I'm not wrong, the mysterious person behind the fifth prince probably has something to do with you, right? As she said this, her eyes blinked, revealing a slight sharpness. It was as if she wanted to peer into the depths of Wang Chong's heart. Wang Chong's heart trembled, and he hurriedly lowered his head. Right now, most of the princes and concubines in the royal palace were guessing why the fifth prince had suddenly been reborn and could cultivate martial arts. They were also investigating the mysterious person behind him. If others were to find out that he was behind this, the entire Wang clan would probably be viewed as an enemy by all the princes, concubines, and concubines in the royal palace. Therefore, he tried his best to avoid meeting the fifth prince in public, lest others find out. When he met Consort Taizhen, he also tried his best to avoid talking about his relationship with the fifth prince. However, Consort Taizhen was clearly not as simple as the outside world thought, and she was definitely not someone who could be fooled easily. Wang Chong didn't even mention this point, but Consort Taizhen had already guessed the truth behind it. Wang Chong replied without any hesitation. One should never overestimate a person, much less underestimate a person. Even though many people in the outside world thought that Consort Taizhen was just a woman who relied on her beauty to rise to power and had no other merits, Wang Chong knew that this was definitely not true. An ordinary woman would never be able to endure as much criticism as she did and still be able to endure it. An ordinary woman would never be able to survive in the royal palace, which was filled with so many schemes and schemes. When many people saw Consort Taizhen, they were easily attracted to Yang Zhao, thinking that she relied on Yang Zhao to take care of everything. However, Wang Chong knew that this was a grave mistake. Consort Taizhen had entered the royal palace before Yang Zhao had entered the capital and had successfully set down her roots. Regardless of whether she had Yang Zhao or not, she was definitely not as weak and useless as others imagined her to be. When a concubine smiles in the red dust, no one will know that she is a lychee. Concubine Taizhen wasn't as weak and easily deceived as others thought. Chapter 422. Women were always the type that were easily underestimated. It was precisely because he understood this that Wang Chong didn't deny it, nor did he hesitate in the slightest. Any action that one thought to be clever would ultimately be the victim of one's own ingenuity. Is it really you? The two of them were stunned by Wang Chong's words. Even Consort Taijin didn't expect Wang Chong to admit to it so easily. It's me. Wang Chong admitted once more. Why? Consort Taijin suddenly asked curiously. The Wang clan had already established a relationship with the first prince, and the first prince was likely to be the future heir apparent. Since ancient times, the rule of first prince wasn't something that could be said casually. Of the princes, the first prince had the highest chance of inheriting the throne. Consort Taijin couldn't understand why Wang Chong would take such a huge risk to go against his big uncle just to help the fifth prince, who didn't seem to be of any benefit to the Wang clan. What is this Wang clan's Qilin's son thinking? Consort Taijin stared at Wang Chong with a glint in her eyes. She suddenly felt a strong sense of curiosity. It would be one thing if he was an ordinary person, but the person before her was Wang Chong. Regardless of whether it was his song of purity and peace, or his inconceivable feat of persuading the king of song to change his mind and support her when he entered the palace, or his actions in the regional commander's incident. Even the godlike supreme emperor, whom he revered the most, was full of praise for this young man who was only in his teens. Regardless of which angle she looked at it from, the young man before her wasn't an ordinary person. He couldn't be judged using common sense. Consort Taijin suddenly wanted to know what drove this miracle. Why would this young man disregard the stance of his clan and the first prince to come to her Yuzhen palace to recommend the unknown fifth prince to her? How did he come up with such thoughts? Wang Chong glanced at the mysterious white-clothed beautiful women on both sides of Consort Taijin. Consort Taijin understood and raised her wrist slightly. The two of them understood and left respectfully. Soon, only Consort Taijin, Yang Zhao, and Wang Chong were left in the room. It's very simple. It's because my thoughts are different from my uncle's. I think that the future crown prince is probably not the first prince, but His Highness the fifth prince. After the two white-clothed beautiful women left, Wang Chong shocked the world with a brilliant feat and said without the slightest hesitation. Wang Chong did not hide anything and immediately told him the secret he had discovered from the fifth prince. When Consort Taijin and Yang Zhao heard Wang Chong say that the fifth prince was the future son of heaven, they were already dumbfounded. When they heard that Li Heng's dragon-shaped supreme art was a five-fingered true dragon, the two of them were so shocked that they couldn't speak. Even Yang Zhao, who had the least understanding of the struggles in the palace, knew what a five-fingered true dragon meant. If Wang Chong leaked this secret, it would definitely cause an earth-shattering transformation in the palace. When the princes learned that Li Heng could suddenly cultivate martial arts, they were all filled with killing intent. If they knew that the Holy Emperor had passed on a five-fingered true dragon technique to him, even if it meant being punished by the Holy Emperor, they would definitely kill him. For a moment, the two cousins looked at the youth in the hall like they had seen a ghost. This was no ordinary news or intelligence report, but a massive secret that could alter the course of the War of the Princes. Although he was young, the intelligence in Wang Chong's grasp was so astonishing that even the most formidable king of spies would be flabbergasted. The hall was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Wang Chong said nothing, but his mind was in turmoil. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. In normal circumstances, he would never have told anyone about the fifth prince. But if the fifth prince wanted to survive this calamity, he needed Consort Taijin's help. And if he wanted to truly obtain her help, there were some secrets that he had to tell her. Only this way could he obtain her trust. The facts proved that Wang Chong's risk had not been in vain. The shock on the faces of Consort Taijin and Yang Zhao was enough to show that his words had affected them. If one were to say that the fifth prince was just a young prince who didn't have much power at the start, then right now, his position in the hearts of Consort Taijin and Yang Zhao had undoubtedly risen to a whole new level. Your Majesty, the War of the Princes is no small matter. It is not strange for Your Majesty to be unable to quickly make a decision. This matter is not urgent, and Your Majesty still has plenty of time to think. But Wang Chong still has a few words for Your Majesty. I hope that your majesty can open it after Wang Chong leaves. As Wang Chong spoke, he suddenly took out a letter that he had hidden in his sleeve. Strike while the iron is hot. Taking advantage of the fact that his words had taken effect on Consort Tai Zhen and the fact that the fifth prince's status in Consort Tai Zhen's eyes had greatly increased, Wang Chong took out his final trump card. Whether or not it could take effect on Consort Tai Zhen and make her completely decide to stand on the fifth prince's side would depend on this final letter. Wang Chong, what's the matter? Can't you tell me face to face? Do you really have to write a letter? Seeing the letter Wang Chong had taken out, Consort Tai Zhen had a strange expression on her face. It was something that could clearly be explained face to face, but Wang Chong had insisted on taking out a letter. Anyone who saw this would find it very strange. No, your majesty will understand after reading it. Wang Chong held the letter with both hands and shook his head. This time, he was abnormally determined. There were some things that could only be thought of, not done. There were some things that could only be seen, not spoken. I understand. Bring it over. Then Wang Chong will take his leave. Wang Chong handed over the letter and did not linger any longer. Before the palace gates completely closed, he left Yuzhen Palace. Almost at the same time that Wang Chong turned to leave, Consort Tai Zhen hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she could not hold back her curiosity and opened the letter. She pulled out the letter with the crooked handwriting. With just a single glance, Consort Tai Zhen's mind was thrown into disarray. A hint of panic flashed across her eyes. However, it was only for an instant before she concealed it. Other than herself, not even Yang Zhao, who was right next to her, noticed it. Little sister, what exactly did this brat write? Yang Zhao leaned over and glanced at the letter in her hands as he asked curiously. He was really very curious as to what exactly Wang Chong had insisted on writing on the letter and not saying it in front of him. It's nothing. To his surprise, Consort Tai Zhen, who had always trusted Yang Zhao and shared all her secrets with him, suddenly crushed both the letter and the envelope into powder. Before Yang Zhao could even catch a glimpse of a single word, the letter had already vanished into thin air. This had never happened before, left Yang Zhao flabbergasted. He stood there in a daze, somewhat at a loss as to what to do. Cousin, pass on my decree. Take one of my jade pendants and bestow it on 5th Prince Li Heng. Say that he performed the sword dance in front of the palace and performed to the Holy Emperor. I am very appreciative of his filial piety and have specially bestowed it to him. After saying this, Consort Tai Zhen turned and left, entering the inner hall. Behind her, Yang Zhao was dumbstruck. Even if you beat him to death, he still wouldn't understand what Consort Tai Zhen had seen in Wang Chong's letter for her to be in such a panic. Moreover, Consort Tai Zhen clearly hadn't made up her mind before. Why had she immediately changed her mind after reading Wang Chong's letter and decided to bestow a jade pendant on Li Heng? Moreover, she had even made it clear that she would pass on her decree. Wasn't this basically announcing to the entire palace that she would protect Prince Li Heng in the future? This was the exact opposite of his cousin's original intention of not lightly getting involved in the War of the Princes. Yes, this lowly subject will carry out the decree. Yang Zhao sighed, gave a deep bow, and then turned to leave. No matter what decision his little sister had made, he would do his utmost to carry it out. But what he couldn't understand was what sort of bewitching drug his sworn brother had fed Consort Tai Zhen for her to have such a massive change in attitude after reading a single letter. This sworn brother of mine really isn't someone a normal person can fathom. Yang Zhao sighed, unable to tell whether he was happy or sad, angry or happy. Shaking his head, he quickly walked out of Yuzhen Palace. He could almost imagine that after he left this place, there would probably be another earth-shattering wave in the depths of the palace. Given his cousin's current status, she would definitely be able to stir up another storm in the palace. Meanwhile, Consort Tai Zhen was walking through the depths of Yuzhen Palace, her mind in turmoil, frustrated. In her mind, Wang Chong's crooked handwriting replayed over and over again. Although the letter had been burned by her, the words on the letter became more and more profound, deeply imprinting themselves into her mind. Generally speaking, when one uses beauty to deal with others, When beauty fades, love flees, and flees leads to the end of kindness. In the letter Wang Chong had written to consort Taizhen, there was nothing else, only this simple line that had no head or tail. Although it was simple, consort Taizhen already understood Wang Chong's meaning. This line had not been created by Wang Chong, but more than 1,000 years ago in the Great Qin Empire. At the time, when a lobbyist of the Qin Empire had persuaded the most favored Madame Hua Yang to accept Qin Yiren as her adopted son, he had said these words. And the latter would one day become the future heir apparent of the Great Qin Empire, giving birth to the first emperor in the history of the Central Plains, first Emperor Yingjing, just like the current Holy Emperor. Madame Hua Yang had no children, but she doted on her son, just like her. Qin Yiren, on the other hand, wandered the world without anyone to rely on and was not valued, just like fifth Prince Li Heng. But all these metaphors could not compare to the simple line on the surface of the letter. Generally speaking, when one uses beauty to deal with others, when beauty fades, love flees, and flees leads to the end of kindness. Consort Taizhen was well aware of how she had risen to her current position, which was why she was so anxious, which was why Wang Chong's words had such a great impact on her. Wang Chong had said so many things and revealed so many secrets, but none of them could compare to the shock that these words had given her. Because this truly was the greatest worry and taboo in the depths of her heart that she had never mentioned to anyone. Wang Chong, I hope that this consort did not make an error in judgment. Chapter 423. Congratulations to user for participating in the War of the Princes, participating in the True Dragon Project, and changing 5th Prince Li Heng's fate. You are rewarded 15 points of destiny energy. As Wang Chong walked out of the Imperial Palace in the darkness and closed the gate behind him, a voice he had not heard in a long time resounded in his mind. With this voice and a light breeze, an invisible energy poured into Wang Chong's body from the depths of space-time. Wang Chong felt his entire body warm. I've finally succeeded. Upon hearing this voice, Wang Chong's lips curled into a smile. He knew that his final letter had been effective. When dealing with those Uzan experts in the practice ground, Wang Chong had already obtained 15 points of destiny energy. With the addition from consort Taizhen, Wang Chong had obtained 30 points of destiny energy in a single day. At this point, Wang Chong had accumulated 109 points of destiny energy. Adding on the destiny energy he had used to exchange for metal bone, gold organs, help 5th Prince Li Heng change his blood, and use the world energy restriction several times, Wang Chong had accumulated more than 200 points of destiny energy. And for Wang Chong, when he had accumulated 200 points of destiny energy, it represented a completely new meaning. I can finally exchange for origin energy items. As Wang Chong walked along the stone street, he gave a long sigh of relief, his mind incredibly relaxed. The Stone of Destiny's rewards were divided into heart, physique, energy, technique, and power. But because he didn't have enough destiny energy, Wang Chong had only been able to exchange for iron bones, panther bones, gold organs, and blood transformation. If he wanted to increase his origin energy, Wang Chong could only buy pills from the Imperial clan in the Imperial City. But once he unlocked the origin energy rewards, things would be different. This meant that Wang Chong could use destiny energy to exchange for origin energy rewards that could increase his strength. In this way, Wang Chong's strength would grow much faster. Young master. The sound of footsteps came from the darkness, interrupting Wang Chong's thoughts. The eagle had a large eagle perched on its shoulder, and it was striding over from afar. How is it? It's fine now. Wang Chong smiled and gestured that everything was going well. Once the matter of consort Taizhen was settled, the 5th prince would have nothing to worry about. Although no one dared to say that they were definitely safe, with consort Taizhen's protection, at least everyone had something to worry about. Even the 1st prince and the 3rd prince would not dare to act recklessly. Come, let's go back to the training camp. Grabbing the warhorse from the hands of the Wang clan guards behind the eagle, Wang Chong leapt onto its back. Everything was on the right path, and the fifth prince had also embarked on his own path to fight for the throne. Now it was time for his own plan. Now that the deflecting blade manner had developed to this stage, it was time to move on to the next step of the plan. I just wonder how Dusong Mangpoj is doing. As he gazed at the dark sky and the tens of thousands of lanterns in the city, Wang Chong thought of the Uzun great general Dusong Mangpoj who had been traveling incognito, and a smile appeared on his lips. This Uzun great general was an existence that would cause the Tang dynasty of the Central Plains to feel a deep headache. This person was not only powerful in martial arts, but also extremely intelligent. Thus, even a hero like Geshu Han, who had ruled over the Tang dynasty and ruled over the Uzun border, had been helpless against him. However, now that Wang Chong had seen through his identity in the capital, he probably wouldn't be so lucky. Let's see if you'll be so lucky. With a faint smile, Wang Chong urged his horse toward deflecting blade manner. Gallop! A strong horse hoof stomped down, kicking up a cloud of dust. While Wang Chong was rushing to deflecting blade manner, 60-some li away from the Tang dynasty's capital, a group of Uzun cavalry was galloping toward the Uzun plateau. Ever since Wang Chong had exposed them on the practice ground, Dusong Mangpoj and the others had not even returned to their guest house. They had fled the capital of the Tang dynasty and fled through the night to the Uzun plateau. Hurry! The Tang dynasty is no longer safe. Only by returning to the plateau can we completely escape this danger. On his horse, Dusong Mangpoj had a solemn expression as he urged the cavalry forward. Great General, could we be thinking too much? Could the Tang dynasty have never thought about dealing with us? After all, we've already been 60-some li away from the Tang dynasty, and nothing has happened. An Uzun commander raised his head and said with a sliver of hope. Ever since they had left the practice ground, Great General Dusong Mangpoj had been urging them on. It wasn't that he doubted the Great General's judgment and prestige, but that they had encountered nothing on their journey. Other than their suspicions, there was only the howling of the wind from the hills on their sides. It seemed like they were just scaring themselves. Perhaps not in the past, but it's different now. I also hope that I'm just being paranoid, but that's impossible, Dusong Mangpoj sternly said. From the moment he had left the capital of the Tang dynasty, he had felt like someone was locking onto him from afar, constantly coveting and following him. This feeling had only just begun, but Dusong Mangpoj did not dare to be careless. A centipede dies but never falls down. The current Tang dynasty was far from being as domineering and powerful as it was in the past. But amongst the elites and upper echelons of this massive empire, there were still some extremely formidable individuals that could not be underestimated. That youth of the Central Plains on the plaza was the best example. There were many times when Dusong Mangpoj had wanted to kill him, but in the end he had managed to restrain himself. Although he didn't know the exact origins of that youth, he was certain that he had an extraordinary background. There were many times when that youth had been intentionally provoking him, forcing him to attack. Dusong Mangpoj was well aware of his opponent's intentions. As long as he killed that youth, the Tang dynasty would have more than enough evidence to attack him in the capital. If that really happened, just as that youth had said, he might not even be able to walk out of the Tang dynasty's capital. That youth's prediction had been spot on. I originally believed that the Central Plains had declined on this trip to the Tang dynasty, but I didn't expect to encounter such a monstrous youth on the last day. The fate of the Central Plains still hasn't run out yet. Dusong Mangpoj couldn't help but sigh. The first prince had swapped places with his cavalry, having his subordinates assume his identity to meet with the Holy Emperor of the Tang dynasty. This matter had been so secretive that no one knew of it other than his own party. Not even the ministers of the Tang dynasty had seen through it. Dusong Mangpoj had originally believed that no one would see through the first prince's trick until he returned to the plateau. Who would have thought that the young man would be able to see through their plans so easily and kill the cavalryman in front of everyone without any hesitation, dampening the prestige of their group? Of course, if that was all there was to it, it would have been fine. After all, this was a trick that the first prince had played on a whim, a game. But the youth had been able to expose his identity with a single glance. This was what truly shocked Dusong Mangpoj. If the one who had done this had been some renowned figure of the Tang dynasty, he would have been able to accept it. But given the youth's age, he could never have met him, much less recognized him. For the identity he had maintained for more than 3 months to be exposed in such a manner was truly unexpected for Dusong Mangpoch. "Great General, I'm sorry. I've implicated you." At this moment, a voice came from the side. Dusong Mangpoch turned his head and saw an Uzun cavalry looking at him in shame. "First Prince, there's no need to be so polite. I was the one who made this decision in the first place. Coming to the Tang dynasty was to continue my dream of many years, and it has nothing to do with you. First Prince, there's no need to blame yourself." Dusong Mangpoch grinned and waved his hand, unconcerned. This shamefaced Uzun cavalry was naturally the true Uzun First Prince. The Uzun people were fierce and ferocious, and they worshipped martial prowess. The Uzun First Prince was a proud person who would not easily apologize to others. But the First Prince also knew that this matter was no trifling matter. If a great general of the Tang dynasty were to stealthily infiltrate the Uzun Empire would definitely do its utmost to keep them here. This was clearly the situation that Dusong Mangpoch was facing. Although the others were still doubtful and unsure if someone was really targeting them, the Uzun First Prince knew that the elites of the Tang dynasty would never let go of this chance. And if he hadn't been too proud and thought himself clever, causing this martial arts competition in the practice ground, he would never have fallen to this level. It could be said that if anything happened to Dusong Mangpoch, it would all be his responsibility. The Uzun Empire had 1 million soldiers, but it only had a scant few great generals. If something happened to Dusong Mangpoch in the Tang dynasty, it would be a massive stain on this operation, and it would even severely threaten his right to succeed the Tsenpo. This was the true reason for the First Prince's unease. "Listen to me. As long as we are within the borders of the Tang dynasty's capital, the Tang dynasty will not dare to move against us. But once we are a certain distance away from the capital, things will be different. If something happens to us, the Tang dynasty will be able to push the blame onto someone else. And in order to deal with me, they will definitely move against you. Because this is the only way to explain things on the surface. This is why I am escorting all of you out of the capital. In a little while, don't take the main road. Once you leave this place, choose a clear direction. You can't turn back until you reach the Uzun Plateau." Dusong Mangpoch said, his voice tinged with an ominous aura. "General, will you not be coming with us?" An Uzun cavalry commander suddenly sensed something and raised his head. "Of course he can't go with you." Before Dusong Mangpoch could reply, a voice came from the side of the road. The voice was so sudden that everyone jumped in fright. Who is it? Who's sneaking around? Hurry and get out here." The crowd fell into an uproar, and the Uzun cavalry seemed to be provoked. They all turned around, pulled out their shining scimitars, and aimed them at the source of the voice. A light breeze blew past and the wind blew. Diagonally in front of the crowd, a cold figure wearing clothes as white as snow and a ribbon fluttered in the wind. His hands were clasped behind his back as he slowly walked out from the pine forest. This seemingly thin body exuded an aura as vast as the mountains and seas. Bang! A silver boot lightly stepped on the ground, causing the earth to quake. The energy in a radius of several thousand zhongs suddenly changed. All the grass, trees, branches, and leaves began to exude a needle-like aura as they aimed at Dusong Mangpoch's group on the official road. Nay! Chapter 424. It's you! Dusong Mangpoch's expression chilled as he stared at that elegant white-clothed figure. This was the only thought left in his mind. Dusong Mangpoch knew who this person was. In the capital of the Tang dynasty, this person was undoubtedly the leader of the Confucian school. Even in the capital of the Tang dynasty, this person was an influential figure. Although he was not a great general, his influence was not one bit inferior to a great general of the Central Plains like Geshu Han. He could only win, not fall behind. Dusong Mangpoch had never imagined that the Tang dynasty would send such a person to kill him. It's me. This person's face was like jade, and despite the deep wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, he seemed to be in his 50s or 60s, but his appearance was that of a man in his 30s or 40s. A long sword hung from his waist, and a bell hung from it. The bells fluttered in the wind and clashed against the silver scabbard, producing a clear and melodious sound. Dusong Mangpoj felt like he was facing a powerful foe, and he was a gentle and frail man. The emperor of the Tang dynasty truly thinks highly of me, Dusong Mangpoj solemnly said as he looked at the newcomer. Ha, a great general has shown such sincerity to travel such a great distance to the capital. No matter what, we must properly entertain you. 10 years ago, great general traveled incognito. This Li came in a hurry and did not have the time to entertain you. This time, no matter what, we must sit down and drink with general. The white-clothed middle-aged man with a sword hanging on his waist said as he slowly walked forward. The leaves, the tips of the grass, and the needle-like sword intent that pierced through the air became even more formidable. This feeling of having a dagger pressed against their backs made all the Uzun cavalry, including the first prince, feel uneasy, their hair standing on end. The Uzun did not fear the bloody charge of the battlefield. However, the scene in front of them had clearly exceeded the scope of an ordinary battlefield. You've come for me. Can you let them go? Dusong Mangpoj knew that no matter what, it would be difficult to resolve this matter peacefully. Right now, he only hoped that he could attract the attention of the person in front of him so that the others could have a way out. I'm fine with it. However, whether or not they could escape with their lives depended on themselves. After all, I'm not the only one here today. The middle-aged man in white said with a profound tone. He did not even look at the first prince and his men, as if the Uzun cavalry were just some small fries. For a moment, all the Uzun cavalrymen felt humiliated, but at the same time, they felt relieved. This Zai was too powerful, so powerful that they couldn't even muster the will to resist. The gap between the two sides was simply incalculable. Understood. What are you waiting for? Hua. Everyone understood and quickly dispersed in all directions. Even the first Prince of Uzun was panicking. More than a dozen people split into more than a dozen directions, panicking like stray dogs. In just a short while, they disappeared into the dense forest. Just as Dusong Mangpoj had ordered, not a single one of the tensome cavalrymen chose the smooth path. Dusong Mangpoj remained motionless until the first prince and his men were far away. Only then did he turn to the leader of the Tang dynasty's Confucian school. Come. Dusong Mangpoj said to the other side. Everything was unavoidable, and now he had stepped forward. As general wishes, the dangerous and terrifying middle-aged man faintly smiled, and then, under Dusong Mangpoj's gaze, he stepped forward with a silver boot. Boom! A moment later, a huge tornado-like light pillar suddenly rose into the sky with a loud rumble. The bright light mixed with the sounds of dragons and elephants turned the sky into day. And when the destructive energy contained in this pillar of light was released, all the trees in a radius of 10 some li were instantly turned to ash. This was a heaven-shaking battle. Wang Chong learned of this news 2 days later. A diplomatic mission from the Uzun Empire was returning from the Tang dynasty to the Uzun. When it passed through Longxi and entered the border, it was suddenly attacked by a Turkic force. Other than the Uzun first prince and a few Uzun warriors, no one else was able to escape. The Tang dynasty expressed its deep apologies for this matter. In addition, it stated that although the first prince and his men had not been attacked in the territory of the Tang dynasty, it would strengthen its efforts to exterminate the Turkic forces that had infiltrated the border. As for the person that Wang Chong was most concerned about, Uzun Great General Dusong Mangpoj, no one in the Tang dynasty, from the imperial court to the common people, talked about him. It was like this Uzun Great General had never appeared. And this was indeed the case. Dusong Mangpoj's name was not on the list of the Uzun Empire's diplomatic mission. He had been replaced by some obscure Uzun soldier. Since he had never come, how could he talk about it? When Wang Chong heard the news from the Eagle, he couldn't help but laugh. There were still many capable people in the imperial court who knew how to play these games. Thus, politics was always the dirtiest game, no matter where it was. However, Wang Chong had asked around and used the influence of his clan to find out a little information on Dusong Mangpoj. Dusong Mangpoj had succeeded in escaping, but he had been heavily injured. Given his injuries, it would be a very long time before the border between the Tang dynasty and the Uzun Empire would see this influential great general of the Uzun Empire. What a pity! Even so, he still managed to escape. In the pavilion of Deflecting Blade Manor, Wang Chong sat on the ground, slamming the letter in his hand onto the table, a look of regret on his face. Dusong Mangpoj had only been heavily injured after his identity had been exposed. This was completely different from what Wang Chong had expected. If this Uzun great general could die in the territory of the Tang dynasty, Wang Chong might be able to obtain a reward of energy points that could change his fate. But Wang Chong was also well aware that Dusong Mangpoj was on the same level as Geshu Han, Fomin Linta, Gao Xianji, and Zhang Shogui. It wasn't too difficult for such a person to heavily injure them, but killing them was no easy task. After all, the strength of an imperial great general could not be underestimated. Moreover, if they wanted to escape, it would not be easy to stop them. But no matter what, without the presence of a powerful figure like the Uzun, the western border of the empire would be much more peaceful. The pressure on Geshu Han would also lessen. In this aspect, Wang Chong had inadvertently helped Geshu Han greatly. Forget it. Heavily injuring him is already pretty good. If I really want to kill him, I'll have to do it on the real battlefield. As these thoughts ran through his mind, Wang Chong quickly calmed down. Dipping his pen in ink, he began to write again. Bright Wheel Scripture. After writing down this name on the first line, Wang Chong's mind began to swiftly recall it, and then these memories transformed into a scripture that fell onto the paper, transcribing the techniques and scriptures in his memory. In truth, Deflecting Blade Manor already had a few of Wang Chong's transcriptions, but these were far from enough. What Wang Chong needed to do was establish a scripture repository unique to Deflecting Blade Manor. Only in this way could Deflecting Blade Manor be complete, and only in this way could Wang Chong establish a complete set of advantages. Furthermore, even when Wang Chong was no longer around, Deflecting Blade Manor would still be able to continuously absorb talents and provide them to the empire. With Wang Chong's foresight, experience, and fighting prowess, as well as the massive pool of students and strength within reach of the Kunwa training camp, not only would those who joined Deflecting Blade Manor be able to learn the art of war and cultivate in the spirit vein, they would also be able to learn a large number of cultivation techniques that couldn't be easily learned elsewhere. Furthermore, Deflecting Blade Manor spanned across the 3 great training camps, and the network of connections it had slowly built up would also be able to swiftly send the talents of Deflecting Blade Manor to their respective specialties. Only by making full use of these resources would he be able to swiftly rewrite the history of the Tang dynasty's gradual decline and shake up the entire structure of the Central Plains. The strength of a single person was simply too weak. Only by gathering the strength of everyone could he rewrite an era and rewrite the fate of the empire. Although Deflecting Blade Manor was small, to Wang Chong, it was the fulcrum where he could gather the strength of everyone and rewrite the fate of an era. Tossing aside a book that could calm one's mind and subdue one's inner demons, Wang Chong beckoned the eagle over. Take these books and bring them to the underground scripture cavern. The scripture pavilion hadn't been completed yet, and Deflecting Blade Manor didn't have the ability to protect itself. For the time being, they could only be stored in the underground cavern of Deflecting Blade Manor. But Gongzi, the eagle, who had always been obedient to Wang Chong, unexpectedly stopped in his tracks, showing no intention of obeying Wang Chong. That person is currently in the scripture cavern. Isn't this a little inconvenient? Isn't that even better? With him around, there won't be any worries in the scripture cavern. Isn't that even better? Wang Chong raised his head and faintly smiled. Wang Chong knew who the eagle was referring to. The only person who dared to barge into his Deflecting Blade Manor, completely disregarding his fate, and the only one who dared to make others angry was the future invincible great general Li Sai. A few days ago, when Li Sai came to look for Wang Chong, he had inadvertently barged into the underground cavern. Initially, Li Sai had been disdainful of the scriptures written by Wang Chong. How formidable could the scriptures written by a brat who was still wet behind his ears be? But after flipping through a few of the scriptures, Li Sai's attitude changed completely. From then on, Li Sai stayed in the cavern. He was a courageous and loyal official, but he was also a martial maniac who viewed martial arts as his own life. Wang Chong was well aware of this, so he lifted the ban. Not only did he allow Li Sai to stay in the cavern to flip through all of his scriptures, he even sent him 3 meals a day so that he could focus on reading through the books. In truth, Li Sai could now be considered half a guardian of Wang Chong's scriptures. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.